Chapter 898. Aside from me, Bai Ling was also shocked. She hadn't expected Wang Li to have such an idea. Unlike me, Bai Ling was only stunned for a moment. Then, she turned to me and said, "Sage, Wang Li is right. If these children are raised well, they will be of great use in the future." After being interrupted by Bai Ling, I calmed myself down and rubbed Wang Li's little head as a compliment. Then, I nodded to Bai Ling. "That's right. The Witchcraft Alliance is in dire need of manpower. It's a good thing to include this problem in the plan." Bai Ling suddenly looked hesitant. After a moment of silence, she said hesitantly, "Sage, there's something. I'm not sure if I should say it." I felt strange and turned to look at her. "Just say it." After getting my permission, Bai Ling frowned and said, "Our tribe has always been small. On one hand, the living environment is bad, and on the other hand, our population is small. This time, the number of people who return from the mountain and sea realm is far from what we expected. With the monster race wreaking havoc, it's almost impossible for us to develop." I didn't know why Bai Ling suddenly changed the topic to the development of the Witchcraft Alliance, but seeing her hesitant expression, I nodded and encouraged her to continue. The worry between Bai Ling's eyebrows hadn't disappeared, but she looked more determined. She lifted her head to look at me and continued, "From what I can see, in such a situation, if the witch tribe wants to develop, we have to absorb other powers. The children in front of us are the most suitable targets. They are young, and they aren't people of metaphysics. They don't know the difference between the Witchcraft Alliance and the Witchcraft Alliance. Moreover, they are naturally intelligent. If we nurture them with the Witchcraft Alliance's spells, they will be no different from the Witchcraft Alliance." After hearing her words, I finally understood why she suddenly changed the topic and became so hesitant. Bai Ling was the chief of the Witchcraft Alliance. She must have been very worried about the future of the Witchcraft Alliance. After the mountain and sea realm opened, the reality was far from what they had expected. She and Nangong had probably suffered a great blow. It wasn't strange that she wanted to absorb other powers to join the Witchcraft Alliance. As for the worry on her face, it was obvious that she was worried that I wouldn't agree. Although she was the chief, I had the identity of the so-called saint. This was a major matter that concerned the rise and fall of the witch tribe, so she naturally had to ask for my permission. In reality, Bai Ling was worrying too much. Compared to her, my sense of belonging to the witch race was almost zero, and I wouldn't worry about the purity of my bloodline. In my heart, apart from the difference between wizard Qi and Dao Qi, I don't even differentiate between the wizard clan and the human clan. After thinking for a while, I nodded and praised, "You're right. The difference between witch aura and Dao aura is only in terms of power. In reality, since ancient times, the witch tribe has been living together with ordinary humans, and there's no difference between them. Now that the Sorcerer Alliance has been established, there's no need to look into the difference between the Sorcerer tribe and the human tribe in the face of the rampaging monster tribe. I have no objections to recruiting more people to strengthen the Sorcerer tribe. As for this batch of young children, you and Wang Li can take care of them for the time being. You can choose their cultivation method based on their aptitude. Those who have a deeper sense of Qi of Dao will be taught by Wang Li. Those who have a deeper sense of Qi of witchcraft will be taught by you. Even those who have the ability to cultivate witchcraft and witchcraft can be taught according to their aptitude. In the future, save the other young children and use this as an example." When Bai Ling heard this, she gladly accepted the order. Wang Li was also quite eager to try. He was obviously very interested in being the master of someone of the same age. Thus, I smiled and gave him the task of comforting the young children for the time being. Now that he could sense Qi of Dao, it shouldn't be a problem for him to use some introductory techniques to attract the young children and appease them. After dealing with this matter, Bai Ling reported to me, "Sage, do we need to inform Duo Ji and the others about this?" Her words reminded me of something. The matter of taking in outsiders is related to the rise and fall of the Sorcerer tribe. Although with my status, I can make the decision with just a word, Bai Ling and Duo Ji are the actual leaders of the Sorcerer tribe. I have to inform them about this. Bai Ling's reminder was clearly worried about Duo Ji's attitude. She wanted to use my status to make this matter go smoothly. Of course, I wouldn't point it out. After thinking it through, I nodded in agreement. Bai Ling also told me that during the past few days, she had been spending some time with Duoji and the others in the mountain and sea realm, telling them about what had happened in the mortal world. They had just entered the mortal world, and there were many things that were very different from the mountain and sea realm. That was why, given the current shortage of manpower, she didn't send them out. She wanted to wait until they had a basic understanding of the ways of the world. Since it was time for Bai Ling to teach them, I went with her to see Duoji. When we arrived, it was just as Bai Ling had said. All the members of the witch tribe from the mountain and sea realm, regardless of their cultivation bases, were here. From this, I could see that Bai Ling and Reverend Guan were very cautious, which made me feel a lot more at ease. When Duoji saw me, he was as humble and respectful as before. He quickly saluted me and asked how I was doing. I casually chatted with him for a bit, then indicated for Bai Ling to get to the point. After hearing Bai Ling's words, Duoji looked hesitant and conflicted. Before he could say anything, the other members of the witch tribe standing behind him began to discuss the matter. Although no one dared to step forward to question Bai Ling, it was clear from their expressions that they weren't happy about the matter. Originally, I hadn't given much thought to the opinions of the witch tribe of the mountain and sea realm, but now that I saw their attitude, I quickly understood. Compared to Bai Ling and the others, the witch tribe of the mountain and sea realm lived in even worse conditions. They were constantly surrounded and slaughtered by the demon tribe, which inevitably gave them a strong sense of race. It was only natural that they would reject Bai Ling's proposal. In some ways, I rather admired their strong sense of race. However, considering the current situation, it was a stumbling block in our fight against the demon tribe. Bai Ling opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but I waved my hand to stop him. I raised my voice and spoke to Duoji, as well as his people. There are differences in the Tao of witchcraft. That is an undeniable fact. However, compared to the differences in the Tao of witchcraft, the difference between the witch tribe and the demon tribe is even more important. It is also something that we care about. The demon tribe is now powerful. You can either experience the oppression and slaughter you have endured for thousands of years, or you can ally with other powers to strengthen yourselves and launch a counterattack, returning the humiliation you have endured for thousands of years. At this time, you have to make a choice. Many times, when a matter reached a certain level, its true nature would become clearer. After hearing my words, Duoji and his clansmen hesitated. I didn't rush them. Instead, I brought Bai Ling out of the room and told Duoji to discuss the matter with his people. Once he had an answer, he would come out and inform me. After the mountain and sea realm had opened, the difference in power between the witch tribe and the demon tribe was obvious. One could imagine what kind of life the witch tribe had lived in the past years. Therefore, under the temptation of returning the humiliation, their final decision was obvious. As expected, after an hour, Duoji walked out of the house. After bowing to me again, he agreed to Bai Ling's suggestion wholeheartedly. However, he emphasized that we mustn't accept anyone related to the monster race. His words were like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. There is a huge difference between the human tribe and the demon tribe, and there was a genetic barrier between the two. Therefore, it was impossible for anyone related to the demon tribe to exist. Furthermore, after the mountain and sea realm opened, the human tribe suffered a calamity. However, the human tribe had a large population, which was enough to support the growth of the witch tribe. After I expressed my thoughts with a smile, Duoji had a strange expression on his face. He looked at me, then at Bai Ling. After a while, he said to me, "Sage, could it be that you don't know about the existence of half-beastmen?" Half-beastmen? This term was unfamiliar, but the moment I heard it, I thought of many things. Then, an expression of extreme disbelief appeared on my face. Chapter 899. The demon tribe and the shaman tribe coexist in the mountain and sea realm. That's something I learned from Nangong a long time ago. When the mountain and sea realm opened, everyone knew about it. As for the specific situation of the sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe, one would know from the number of sorcerer tribe members that came out. On the other hand, the Magi and the Taoist sects were still somewhat estranged from each other. Because of all of these reasons, no one really knew much about the demon tribes in the mountain and sea realm. Of course, if it were me or Whitey, it would have been easy for us to learn more about the situation in the mountain and sea realm from Duo G and the other Magi. However, I wasn't involved, and Whitey was only an assistant to Reverend Guan. Therefore, no one asked Duo G any questions. Everyone uses the demon folk of the mortal world as an analogy to the demon folk of the mountain and sea realm. I used to be the same, but now, after hearing Duoji's explanation, I realize that our understanding of the demon folk of the mountain and sea realm is vastly lacking. In response to Bai Ling's question, Dorji's face was calm. He was silent for a moment, as if he were organizing his thoughts. After a moment, he said, "Half-beastmen are the descendants of the mixing of the humans and demons. Back when the mountain and sea realm was sealed off, the Magi, as well as the remaining humans, were vastly weaker than the demons. After years of war, the demons began to enslave the humans and the Magi. Later on, the number of beastmen increased, and the number of human shamans decreased. Even the purebred demon clan gradually became a rare species. When I heard the three words half-beast people, such a thought appeared in my mind. After he explained it in detail, I was no longer as shocked as before and gradually accepted it. Actually, the idea of genetic isolation I had just come up with was nothing more than a wild guess. After all, I had encountered half-beastmen long before the mountain and sea realm had opened. Yao Yao. Looking at her background, her mother was from the Green Hill Fox clan and her father was from the human race. She was the standard half-beast human. While I was thinking, Dorji continued to talk about the half-beastmen. In the mountain and sea realm, with the exception of some of the most powerful greater demon races, such as the dragon folk, virtually all of the other races have been converted into half-beastmen. Originally, the demon clan could only transform into a human when they reached the level of a heavenly master. After becoming a half-beast, some of the beast clan gained intelligence from their mother's womb and had the body of a human, leaving only the head of the beast clan. However, the corresponding change was that they needed to cultivate the yang spirit before they could complete the transformation. After listening to those words, the images of the monster race that I met in Lubo Mountain surfaced in my mind. They had human bodies. Only their heads maintained the appearance of the beast race. At that time, I thought that it was an unknown type of monster, but now I understood that those beast race were half-beast people. In addition, when he and Su Kuan rescued those young children last time, the beasts they encountered also had beast heads and human bodies. After thinking for a moment, I opened my mouth and asked, how much wisdom did the half-beast people develop? What is their attitude towards the human race? Dorji shook his head. Because of their mixed bloodlines, it's hard to say how much wisdom they have. Some of the nobler monster races produce half-beast people who have intelligence similar to that of the human race, or even higher. However, many of the weaker monster races have intelligence similar to that of wild beasts. As for their attitude towards the human race, although there's some races that are friendly towards the human race, the vast majority of the half-beast people are like the monster race, hostile towards the human race. After finishing, Dorji thought for a moment, then added, after many years of war in the mountain and sea realm and the birth of the half-beast people, some of them look very similar to the human race. Because of that, after the mixing of bloodlines, the monster race and the half-beast people no longer have the goal of hunting down the witch race and the human race. Thousands of years ago, they entered a period of stable development. It was because of this that our people were able to hide in the far west, where the monster race rarely went. As for the current situation of the monster race in the mountain and sea realm, we are not too sure. I nodded. Although he didn't know the current situation, what he had just told us had already been of great help. At the very least, we would need to come up with a new plan to identify the monster race. After explaining this to Bai Ling, I thought for a moment, then asked Dorji, how big is the mountain and sea realm? How many monster race and half-beast people are there? Do you know anything about this? Dorji shook his head. Since ancient times, our witch race has declined. Our ancient records were lost long ago. Later generations have lived in seclusion, so we don't know anything about the specific situation. However, according to some of the elders in our race, the mountain and sea realm should be much larger than the human race. There are many different species of monster race, and their numbers are difficult to count. Furthermore, the monster race is mostly lascivious, and they are very good at breeding. It's not hard to guess that there are many half-beast people. I nodded. Although Dorji didn't know the specific situation, he was obviously very intelligent, and his words were very logical. The situation should be similar to what he had guessed. After that, I asked about other things in detail, but just like before, Dorji basically didn't know the specific situation and could only make some simple guesses. Even so, after discussing with him, I had a basic understanding of the situation with the half-beast people. I bid farewell to Dorji, and on the way back, I kept thinking about the half-beast people. From my background, I had the bloodline of Monster Emperor June and Emperor Ku's soul. Although I had long since made up my mind to expel the monster race, it would be unrealistic to say that I didn't feel any pressure. Furthermore, there was the existence of the sacrificial evil spirit, so I had always avoided thinking about it. However, Dorji's words today had broadened my thinking. Since the monster race and the human race could coexist, giving birth to the half-beast people, then could the human race and the monster race also coexist? Even in the current situation, was there another way to go other than an all-out war? As I pondered these questions, I had already returned to my room. At this time, the sacrificial evil spirit was still meditating, but when it saw me, it opened its eyes. Seeing the sacrificial evil spirit, I thought about my previous thoughts and wanted to ask for its opinion. So I asked if it knew about the situation with the half-beast people in the mountain and sea realm. The sacrificial evil spirit didn't say anything and only nodded. Since it already knew, I didn't say anything more and directly told it my previous thoughts, asking for its opinion. Unexpectedly, after the sacrificial evil spirit heard it, it didn't even think about it and directly shook its head. Peace can only be established on the basis that both sides have equal power or that one side has completely established the foundation of rule. What do you think the current situation fits? His question made me speechless, but I immediately understood. It was true that I had taken things for granted. The monster race was powerful, and this was something that couldn't be changed. As a human, I couldn't possibly agree to accept the rule of the monster race, or rather, the half-beast people. After realizing this, I sighed and could only temporarily bury my previous thoughts in my heart. Seeing that I was speechless, the sacrificial evil spirit continued. In fact, regardless of whether it's the human race or the monster race, cultivation is a process of competing for resources. Those with high cultivation base compete with the heavens and earth, while those with low cultivation base compete with others. After entering the cultivation world, it's basically wishful thinking to think about peace. It's the same for the human race and the monster race, and it's the same for the human race. You have to keep this in mind. Don't hesitate when you encounter problems, or you'll be harmed in the future. There was a hint of guidance in his words, and after listening to him, I cupped my hands to express my thanks. The sacrificial evil spirit waved his hand and immediately told me that he had other matters to deal with, so he wouldn't stay for long. He told me not to be depressed, and that as long as my cultivation base continued to increase, I would eventually have the opportunity to meet Bayan again. Previously, he had already told me about Bayan, and I couldn't make any judgments at the moment, so I didn't think too much about it. I just nodded and temporarily bid him farewell. In the current situation, the sacrificial evil spirit's identity was very sensitive, so it wasn't suitable for him to stay for long. It was also a good thing that he left. After he left, I purposely went to talk to Junren Guan about the half-beast people. After that, I learned from him about the current situation of the Witchcraft Alliance stationed outside. Currently, we didn't have many people, and the station outside were only there to provide aid and shelter. Therefore, there weren't many direct battles with the monster race, and the casualties were still within an acceptable range. Chapter 900. I came to the place where the children lived. Before I entered the house, I heard Wang Li's childish voice from the courtyard. I don't have a lighter in my hand, and this isn't magic. As long as you learn from me, you'll be able to draw a fireball from your body. Yes, you'll be able to light a fire with your hands. Hearing those words, I stopped in my tracks. I stood outside the fence and peeked in. I saw dozens of children sitting upright in the courtyard. There wasn't any noise like yesterday, but they were all focused on the fireball in Wang Li's hand. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were filled with surprise and envy. The few sitting in the front row even got closer curiously and extended their hands next to the fireball to feel its temperature, as though they wanted to confirm if the fireball in Wang Li's hand was real. Seeing that, I couldn't help but laugh. Wang Li didn't just have ideas in his head, he also had a way of doing things. It was very effective to use such tricks to attract the children's interest. In fact, when I'd saved these children, not only had I fought with the monster race, but they'd also seen me use spells during the journey. They'd even flown a short distance under my guidance. However, under those circumstances, such a magical thing had brought them more fear than novelty. On the contrary, Wang Li, who was their age, had used tricks like a fireball to attract their interest. The group of children chattered happily. Wang Li didn't stop them, but instead drew another fireball in his hand. He tossed 2 fireballs up and down to attract their attention. Gradually, the children stopped making noise and focused on Wang Li's hands again, as though they were afraid of missing out on something fun. Then, I pushed open the door and walked in. Seeing me enter, Wang Li quickly put away the fireball in his hand and walked over to greet me. Wang Li was a mischievous child, but the group of children didn't care about that. Seeing that Wang Li didn't have a fireball in his hand, they were instantly unhappy and glared at me, the culprit. I smiled and rubbed Wang Li's head. Then I waved my hand, and instantly dozens of fireballs of the same size appeared in the air. It was different from Wang Li, who could only control the fireballs to toss them up and down. With my cultivation, I easily controlled the dozens of fireballs to float in front of the children. At the same time, I used my spiritual power to envelop the children's bodies so that they couldn't feel the pain of the fireball and could only feel the fun it brought. With that, the unhappiness from before disappeared. Everyone stopped glaring at me and looked at the fireball in front of them in surprise. They boldly extended their hands to touch it. Because they were enveloped by my spiritual power, they naturally wouldn't be burned by the fireball. Even touching the fireball with their hands wouldn't be a problem. Thus, everyone hugged their fireballs and played with them happily. After they played excitedly for a few minutes, and their enthusiasm decreased, I extended my hand again and used the Dao Qi manifestation technique to envelop all the fireballs with a layer of Dao Qi and solidify it, forming a Dao Qi crystal with the fireball inside. It looked similar to the shaman ball that Xiao Jin had given me. After doing that, I asked for each child's name and controlled my spiritual power to carve their name on each fireball. Dao Qi was gentle and wouldn't harm people. With the materialized Dao Qi, the temperature of the fireball wouldn't be transmitted. In the future, the children wouldn't be affected even if they held the fireball in their hands. After everyone received a small fireball with their name engraved on it, they could no longer hold back their excitement. Every child stood up and jumped around happily. Their previous fear and panic had completely vanished at this moment. I asked Wang Li to play with them for a while. After they got tired, I said loudly to them, "Children, is this fireball fun?" Most of the 5 or 6 years old children had already entered kindergarten. Thus, after hearing my question, the children were very tacit and replied loudly, "It's fun." Then, "Do you want to create your own fireball?" I continued to ask. "Yes, if you want it, then just like before, sit down and close your eyes. I'll teach you, okay?" "Okay." Using the same method as Wang Li, I quickly made the children listen to me. They all sat down and closed their eyes. They even lined up neatly. After everyone had closed their eyes, I released my spiritual power to envelop all the children. Under my control, the spiritual power quickly made the children fall into a half-awake state. Then, starting from the first child, I used Dao Qi and Shaman Qi to pour into his meridians that hadn't been opened yet. I didn't force them to circulate, I just seeped in through the pores and left a trace near the meridians. Tao Chi and Shaman Chi had their own. When the spiritual power seeped into their bodies, on one hand, it could cleanse their marrow and increase their aptitude. On the other hand, it could make their meridians remember the two auras, Tao Chi and Shaman Chi. Later on, when they started cultivating, they could more easily sense the existence of these two auras. The process wasn't complicated, but it wasn't simple to do. Basically, every step required the use of the sun god's power. With this, even a person with the most ordinary aptitude would be able to sense the witchcraft and chi and successfully enter the cultivation world, let alone these children who already have excellent aptitudes. In the future, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few geniuses who surpassed the first meridian. After I was done, all the children fell into a deep sleep. Then I did the same thing to Wang Li. Unlike the other children, Wang Li had already sensed the chi of the way, and his meridians had already been opened. Thus, I used the chi of the way to comb through his meridians and did a complete circulatory cycle. This allowed his body to produce its own chi of the way, and he successfully entered the dragon-seeking realm. Because of my Tao Chi combing through his meridians, in theory, all the acupoints in his meridians were stimulated by me. When he reached the acupoint ceiling realm, it was possible to open all the acupoints in all four meridians. Of course, it still depended on his aptitude. What I did just increased his chances. After I was done, Wang Li didn't fall into a deep sleep. Instead, he became more energetic. So, I asked him to watch over the children. When they woke up, they would try to sense the shaman chi on their own. At this time, Bai Ling also came from a distance. When I saw her, I was about to ask her to guide the children to sense the shaman chi. However, before I could say anything, Bai Ling looked anxious. She told me that Master Guan had an urgent matter and wanted me to go to him. Although I didn't know what it was, I didn't dare to neglect Bai Ling's expression. After giving Bai Ling some instructions, I hurried to Master Guan's place. When I arrived, Master Guan was waiting for me. He didn't wait for me to speak and immediately said, "Something happened to Wang Can." Wang Can? When I saw Bai Ling's expression, I thought that something had happened to the fatty. I didn't expect that it was Wang Can. As soon as I was about to ask, Master Guan told me the details. He told me that Wang Can and the fatty had gone to a station. However, after Duo Ji had told us about the situation in the mountain and sea realm, Master Guan realized that we didn't know enough about the monster clan in the mountain and sea realm. Therefore, he asked us to go to the place where the mountain and sea realm had opened, which was the border between the human race's territory and the monster clan's territory. He wanted to see if he could enter the monster clan's territory to investigate the situation there. After he issued the order, Wang Can was the first to go there. At that time, Master Guan had prepared an emergency communication talisman. If he encountered any danger and couldn't send a message in time, the talisman would automatically send a message back. As soon as Wang Can arrived, he received the signal from the talisman. Obviously, he was in danger. Chapter 901. According to what Taoist Guan had told me, the border between the demon clan's territory and the human clan's territory was at the place where the mountain and sea realm gate had opened. However, when I arrived there, I discovered that the specific address Taoist Guan had given me wasn't the mountain and sea realm gate, but a place about 50 kilometers away. In front of me was a wasteland with a clear dividing line in the middle. Although there was ancient savage energy in the air where I was standing, it was much thinner. On the other side, the ancient savage energy in the air was so thick that it almost blocked my vision. It was obvious that this was the border between the demon clan's territory and the human clan's territory. I didn't dare to rashly approach and just stood in the distance, spreading my spiritual sense to search for auras in the surroundings. After a while, I frowned. With my current spiritual sense, it wasn't difficult for me to search for auras within 50 kilometers. However, the strange thing was that I couldn't find Wang Can's aura, nor could I sense any aura of the demon clan. According to common sense, it was impossible for the demon clan's territory to have no people patrolling the border between the two clans' territories. Since I couldn't sense any aura, it was highly possible that the ancient savage energy in that area had blocked my detection. However, this wasn't a big deal. What scared me the most was that I couldn't sense Wang Can's aura. It was possible that something had happened to him. I started to get anxious, but I couldn't find anything. I concealed my aura and went to the wasteland, heading toward the border. As I got closer, I could clearly see the situation at the border. Not only was there a distinct, wild, ancient aura, but there was also a clear barrier that separated the two races' territories. However, that barrier wasn't fixed and was slowly moving forward at a speed that was discernible to the naked eye. I now understood why the border wasn't at the mountain and sea realm gate. It turned out that the demon clan's territory was constantly expanding. I didn't know much about the ancient savage energy or the demon clan's power, but the expansion of the demon clan's territory wasn't a good thing for the human clan. It seemed that I would have to discuss this matter with Daoist Guan when I returned. With these thoughts in mind, I didn't get too close to the barrier. Instead, I searched left and right, looking for signs of a battle. While searching, I was a little worried. After all, the demon clan's barrier was moving forward. If Wang Can had already entered the demon clan's territory, I would have to find a way to get in. In this way, the risk was much greater. Although he had heard Duo Ji introduce some of the situation in the demon realm, it was basically ancient matters, and he was still ignorant of the specific situation. Fortunately, my worries didn't come true. After searching for a short while, I sensed a remnant of energy a few kilometers to the left. Immediately after, I saw a pile of broken limbs and corpses. There was scarlet blood all around, and the yellow soil on the ground had already been dyed brown. A thick stench of blood wafted towards me. The ancient aura in this area was also much thicker than in other places. My heart tightened, and I quickly went forward to check. When I got closer, I found a person standing among the pile of corpses. However, this person's body was filled with monster aura, and it was obvious that he wasn't a human. I had been searching for a long time, but I didn't discover the existence of this demon. Clearly, his cultivation is above mine. I didn't dare to be careless. I stopped around 10 meters away and carefully checked the pile of corpses. Then, I found a man covered in blood holding the pango axe. I guessed it was Wang Can. As I was close to him, it was impossible for the monster to not notice me. However, he didn't pay attention to my approach. He bent down and tried to take the pango axe from Wang Can's hand. Since we were facing each other, it was impossible for me to dodge. Moreover, I was worried about Wang Can's current situation. I didn't hesitate anymore. I shouted and used my wizard energy to control the shape-shifting technique. Several dark green swords appeared in front of me and shot towards him. The monster was very arrogant, and he didn't stop moving. Instead, he sped up and took the pango axe from Wang Can's hand. Then, he leaped up and dodged my attack. I used the shape-shifting technique with anger, but this man could easily dodge it. His cultivation base was above mine. After leaping up, he didn't land but stood there, looking down at me. He didn't look happy. At this moment, I saw his appearance. He was wearing a yellow brocade robe. He looked very young, but he had a luxurious aura. It seemed he had a high status in the monster clan. Besides that, he had a human face and a human body, but there were 2 bumps on his head. I couldn't tell what kind of monster he was, and I couldn't tell if he was the half-beastman Duo G had mentioned. While trying to figure out the monster's identity, I took the opportunity to land in front of Wang Can and check his condition. Although I still couldn't sense Wang Can's aura, it was hard to detect him when his aura was extremely weak. I still had a glimmer of hope in my heart. When my hands touched Wang Can's body, I felt cold. My heart sank. Why didn't want to think about it happened? At this moment, Wang Can's aura was completely gone. I didn't care about my identity as a saint, but I had known Officer Wang for several years, and I had long regarded him as my friend. After confirming this fact, I was enraged. I took a deep breath and raised my head to look at the monster in the sky. He was still floating there, as if he didn't care about my anger. He just looked at me with a playful face. His eyes were full of disdain. It seemed he didn't care about me at all. In my anger, I didn't care that I was in a monster clan's territory. I only had one thought in my mind, which was to kill this man to pay for Wang Can's death. I opened my mouth and spat out the Xianyuan sword. The Taoist energy in my body burst out and flowed into the Xianyuan sword. At this moment, the monster in the sky was surprised. He clapped his hands and laughed. It's the Xianyuan sword. It's easy to get it. Then his eyes lit up. His monster energy surged as he dashed toward me. I had to admit that the monster was extremely fast. Before I could react, he had appeared in front of me. However, he didn't attack me. Instead, he stretched out his hand to grab the Xianyuan sword. At this moment, I was trying to urge the Xianyuan sword's power to the maximum. Subconsciously, I was ready to fight back. But when I found that his hand had grabbed the Xianyuan sword, I stopped. This was the Xianyuan sword. It was so sharp that I didn't need to use my Taoist energy to cut off a person's hand. Even a cultivator with high cultivation couldn't do it. So, I temporarily stopped, waiting for him to suffer a setback. Then, I would take the opportunity to attack him. But what happened next shocked me. After the monster grabbed the Xianyuan sword, his fingers weren't hurt at all. Instead, he tried to take the Xianyuan sword away from me. Then, I reacted and urged my sword energy to cut at the monster's hand that was holding the Xianyuan sword. Under my control, the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword increased several times. The monster finally frowned. His hand trembled a few times, but in the end, he retreated and dodged the Xianyuan sword energy. How dare you compete with me for the Xianyuan divine sword? The monster seemed to be angry, but the greed in his eyes became stronger. After dodging the Xianyuan sword energy, he wanted to attack me again. In a short confrontation just now, I had a little understanding of his strength. At this time, I didn't dare to be careless. I was about to urge the Yang God power in my life palace. However, at this moment, the Demon Clan member suddenly stopped in his tracks. I thought he was going to change his move, but then I found that the Pangu axe in his other hand had suddenly changed. The Pangu axe had gathered primordial chaos energy. At this time, it seemed to be stimulated. The primordial chaos energy suddenly jumped and expanded in the air, wrapping the entire axe. In the next quarter of an hour, an incomparably tyrannical power suddenly appeared from the chaotic aura. A white light shot out. Its speed was as fast as lightning. Even my eyes couldn't follow it, as it directly shot into the forehead of the monster race at the side. After that, the white light disappeared, and I saw a white-robed old man appear next to the Pangu axe. At this time, he held the Pangu axe in one hand and pressed his other hand on the monster's forehead. The sudden scene made me almost unable to believe my eyes. What kind of power was this? That monster, whose strength was at least at the mid-stage of the Ascension realm, couldn't even react before dying? Just who was this white-robed old man? At the same time that I was shocked, a strong wind suddenly kicked up in the quiet wasteland. After the sandstorm passed, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly shone with a multicolored light. Immediately after, the dark clouds dissipated and the sky became clear again. The multicolored light turned into a ray of light that was tens of thousands of meters long and fell on the body of the white-robed old man. This strange and indescribable scene made me think back to the scene when Swan and I broke the mountain and sea realm gate. However, the opening of the mountain and sea realm gate was a big event, so it was normal for strange phenomena to occur. But this old man in front of me was alone, and yet he could cause such a phenomenon. It was really frightening. While my mind was shaken, the monster's head exploded under the white-robed old man's finger, turning into a mist of blood. Then his headless body fell from the sky and mixed with the blood and corpses on the ground. Then the white-robed old man's gaze shifted to me. At that moment, all the pores in my body seemed to open up. His gaze seemed to seep into my body and wander back and forth. I couldn't tell if it was because I was frightened or shocked, but my consciousness blurred for a moment. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the white-robed old man suddenly sighed, and his gaze finally left me. Although he was standing far away, his sigh seemed to be right next to my ear. As soon as he sighed, a white light flashed, and he appeared in front of me. However, he didn't pay attention to me. Instead, he bent down, picked up Wang Can's body with both hands, turned around, and walked away. His steps were very slow, but after one step, he was already on the horizon. I could only see his blurry shadow on the horizon. After the second step, even his shadow disappeared. Chapter 902. Even after the old man's figure had disappeared, my consciousness was still wandering. I stood there in a daze. I didn't know how long it had been before my mind gradually recovered, and I came back to life. Before today, I had seen many people with high cultivation, such as the sacrificial evil spirit, celestial master Zhang, and the others. However, it was the first time I'd seen the white-clothed old man change the color of heaven and earth. After I recovered my intelligence, the first word that came to my mind was immortal. In a flash, the powerful monster was killed, and Wang Can's body was taken away. Such a method and such a strange phenomenon couldn't have been done by an immortal. Compared to what I'd felt just now, I hadn't felt so helpless when President Li and Celestial Master Zhang attacked me at the same time. Under that kind of pressure, I couldn't even think about resisting. I felt like I was facing the power of heaven and earth. I couldn't guess his identity, but before he appeared, the primal chaos aura on the Pangu axe had changed. I could infer that this old man had something to do with the Pangu axe. Could he be the weapon spirit of the Pangu axe? Although a divine weapon could recognize its master, it was still incredible that the weapon spirit would appear and take away the body when its master died. Besides that, I couldn't guess his identity, so I had to let it go. I stood in place and circulated the spiritual power in my body twice. After that, I gathered my thoughts and regained my calm. I lowered my head and looked around. Wang Can was killed, and the murderer was executed. His body was taken away by the white-clothed old man. After a series of shocks, the anger and sadness in my heart calmed down. In the end, I just sighed and stopped thinking about this matter. The corpses of the people who had been killed were scattered around. They were the people of the Witchcraft Alliance who had come with Wang Can. Since I was here, I couldn't just ignore them. After calming down, I started to collect their scattered corpses. Although Xiang Lu's bag could carry a lot of things, it couldn't hold so many corpses. After gathering all the corpses, I had to put them together and find a place to bury them. After checking their identities, I would think about how to transport them back to the city. It wasn't easy to put the scattered corpses back together. I carefully identified the aura of each person, and it took me half an hour to put all the corpses together. Then, I dug a big pit nearby and carefully buried each corpse. Since this place was the border of the monster territory, I was worried that the monster territory would discover the traces of the corpses. So, I urged my spiritual power to create a strong gust of wind to blow the sand and plants on the surface of the wasteland to cover the traces of the graves. After doing all that, I turned around to look at the monster territory's barrier and was ready to leave. However, as soon as I lifted my foot, black clouds suddenly appeared in the sky above the monster territory's barrier. Under the black clouds, the wind and sand swept. Almost in a flash, the wild, ancient energy behind the monster territory's barrier burst out, pushing the monster territory's barrier through my body and forward for an unknown distance. I didn't have time to react. In the next second, I was in the middle of the wild, ancient energy. The monster territory's barrier was everywhere, and I didn't know where the monster territory's barrier was. At this moment, an aged, sorrowful, and furious shout resounded from afar in the sky. Who killed my son? This voice carried a supreme might that could destroy the world, and it was even more shocking to me than the white-clothed old man from before. Within the thick monster territory, I felt a sweetness in my throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. The meridians in my body shook, and in an instant, my heaven veins completely shattered. My spiritual power wasn't able to resist it, and after barely maintaining the stability of my fate palace, it collapsed and disappeared. As the spiritual power in my body dissipated, I couldn't stabilize my body in the sky that was full of sand. I was swept into the gale, and my remaining consciousness gradually blurred. At the last second before my consciousness disappeared, I could faintly see an incomparably large black figure in the sky. It flashed past my head, and the black clouds that covered the sky rapidly moved forward. At the same time, the old and sorrowful voice from before entered my ears again. However, this time, it seemed to be extremely far away from me. Who? Killed my son? Along with this voice, my consciousness finally fell into boundless darkness. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when I regained consciousness, I opened my eyes and saw only sand. My head was dizzy, and I was in a perplexed state. I stared at the sand in front of me. After a long time, my memory slowly recovered, and I recalled everything that had happened. It was obvious that I was currently in a barren desert, and the air was filled with an ancient and barbaric aura. Under the violent sandstorm, I hadn't been swept out of the monster race's territory. From the changes in the scenery before me, it seemed that the sandstorm had brought me to a deeper part of the monster race's territory. As I recalled the world-destroying pressure that I had experienced, I was still terrified. After a long time, I calmed down and started to inspect my body situation. Before my consciousness disappeared, I felt that the heaven veins in my body had shattered, and I had lost all of my spiritual power. I had only barely managed to protect my fate palace. After inspecting my body, I realized that the situation hadn't gotten better, but it hadn't gotten worse either. The shaman Chi and Dao Chi didn't have a heaven veins in their body and had almost completely disappeared. Only a tiny bit of it was left in my body. Although my fate palace was protected, it was severely damaged. I couldn't sense the existence of my sun god, and I couldn't activate its power. Only a bit of my spiritual sense remained, but it didn't have any power. I could only inspect the situation within a few kilometers of my body. Under such circumstances, I couldn't heal my injuries on my own and could only rely on external help. Moreover, my injuries this time were even more serious than when I had been crippled by the Liu family. Even if I had the saliva of true dragon, I wasn't sure if I could restore my heaven veins. For the time being, I couldn't worry about that. In any case, I had managed to keep my life, so I had nothing to complain about. I was currently in the monster race's territory, and investigating my surroundings was more important than recovering from my injuries. Fortunately, my fleshly body still had some strength left, and I struggled to sit up. I looked around and confirmed that I was in a barren desert. I was currently under a sand dune, and the items in the Xianglu bag were scattered all around me. I didn't know why. Apart from these items, there was nothing else around me except yellow sand. I didn't know why the items in the Xianglu bag had fallen out, but I remembered that when the mountain and sea realm had opened, the jade bracelet had transformed into the gate of the mountain and sea realm. Tong Tong had no place to reside in, so she had stayed in the Xianglu bag. Where was she now? I searched the Xianglu bag, then used my spiritual sense to scan the surroundings, but I couldn't find anything. What had happened? Could it be that when I was unconscious, I encountered the demonic race, and she appeared and was taken away by them? Or did she lead them away? I made wild guesses in my mind, but I couldn't find any answers. After a moment, I thought of the spirit snake, and quickly called out to the spirit snake in the totem on my back. However, there was no trace of the spirit snake. After examining my body, I had thought of temporarily relying on Tong Tong and the spirit snake to help me. But now, it seemed that not only was I unable to rely on them, but I had also temporarily lost track of them. I silently sat on the ground, my mind constantly making conjectures. After a long time, I stood up with great difficulty and carefully examined my body, as well as the items scattered on the ground. I couldn't find any valuable clues, and my mood became increasingly gloomy. If my previous conjecture was correct, then Tong Tong and the spirit snake must have encountered some unexpected situation while I was unconscious. Given their state of mind, there was no way they wouldn't have left behind some clues to give me a hint. According to the current situation, it was highly possible that they had lost track of them under the pressure of the ancient voice. At that time, I couldn't even protect myself with my cultivation, so I naturally couldn't care about them. It was highly possible that something happened that I didn't notice at all. After understanding this fact, my mood became increasingly gloomy. After a long time, I forcefully gathered my courage and started to save myself. At that moment, I couldn't use my cultivation, so I could only temporarily find a safe place to stay. After losing the protection of my cultivation, I would need water and food. The desert in front of me wasn't suitable for survival, so I had to leave this place. In the desert, besides the yellow sand that filled the sky, there was only the scorching sun in the sky. I stared at the sun until I felt dizzy and I couldn't determine the direction. However, under the scorching sun, I could feel that my strength was rapidly depleting. Thus, I quickly made a decision to randomly choose a direction to explore. If I stayed here, I could only quietly wait for my strength to be exhausted. After walking for an hour, I stopped on a sand dune. My throat felt as though it was on fire, and even my ability to swallow had disappeared. Every time I took in a breath, I felt as though countless grains of sand were rubbing against my mouth. It was extremely difficult to breathe. However, I didn't stop because I had exhausted my strength. It was because there was a sound coming from the other side of the sand dune. From the continuous sound, it was obvious that it was approaching this place. I became more spirited. When the voice came closer, I carefully peeked out from the sand dune. I saw a monster with a dog's head and a human's body on the other side of the sand dune. He was riding an ugly monster beast as he walked towards me. The sound that I had heard earlier should have come from his mouth. From his appearance, it seemed that he was singing. It was obvious that this was the half-beast human that Duo G had mentioned. At the moment, I had lost almost all of my cultivation, and with the remaining bit of spiritual power, I couldn't fight at all. My entire body was on the verge of collapse. If I was discovered by this half-beast human, it would be difficult for me to escape. Chapter 903. When I woke up, the items in the Xianglu pouch were scattered all over the ground. When I was tidying them up, I found an e-ink pearl. It was something that I had specially bought to sneak into the cave in the garden in Shenzhen. Over the years, as my cultivation increased, this item was no longer useful. At the moment, my cultivation wasn't high enough, so I could use it to change my appearance. I hid behind the sand dune and carefully examined the half-beast man's appearance. After confirming that he had a dog's head and a human's body, I turned around and injected the remaining Dao Qi in my body into the e-ink pearl, changing my appearance to that of the half-beast man. From what I had seen and heard, as well as what Duo G had said, there were thousands of races in the monster race. However, within the same race, they all looked similar. If I disguised myself as someone from the same race, I would be able to gain the trust of the half-beast man. Of course, the general appearance was similar, but in terms of height and weight, I made some slight adjustments. In addition, my temperament was different, so I didn't look too similar to the dog-headed monster. After changing my appearance, there weren't any loopholes. However, with my current strength, I couldn't use any tricks. I could only hope that the half-beast man wouldn't be able to see through my cultivation. Of course, even though I had lost all of my spiritual power, my cultivation was still rising. In the monster race, rising cultivation was a rare existence. The chances of the half-beast man seeing through my identity weren't high. Apart from that, there was also the issue of my clothing. The half-beast man only had a few pieces of cloth and a fur coat that was messily sewn together. Even though my clothes were slightly tattered, they were much neater than his. Furthermore, I didn't have any fur on me. After thinking for a while, I tore even more of my clothes. After transforming into a half-beast man, my body was much sturdier than before. My tattered clothes were similar to that of the dog-headed monster. In a rush, I could only deal with it to this extent. At that moment, the dog-headed monster had walked to the front of the sand dune. I didn't have time to prepare, so I stood up from behind the sand dune. My body fell and rolled down the sand dune. All of a sudden, the monster that the half-beast man was sitting on jumped up in fright. It leaped half a meter away, barely dodging my body. Afterwards, it charged at me and barked furiously. After a short moment, the dog-headed man extended his hand to stop the monster. He looked at me in bewilderment and asked loudly, "Friend, are you also returning to the city?" I was already heavily injured, and when I rolled down, I breathed in a large amount of sand. I was in an extremely sorry state, so I didn't hurry to reply. I coughed and spat out the sand. Seeing me in this state, the half-beast man grinned and walked forward, extending his hand in an attempt to help me up. Seeing this, I felt much more at ease. Most of the monster race are savage. I used this method to gamble that this person would be willing to save me. Now, it seems that my gamble was correct. However, to be cautious, I didn't dare to have any physical contact with him. That was why I didn't reach out to him. I struggled to get up from the ground and clean my mouth and nose while watching his next move. The dog-headed man seemed to have a good temper. His ugly face looked at me with a smile. After I finished cleaning, he asked again, "Friend, are you returning to the city?" I was still vigilant, as I didn't understand the situation here. I also didn't know where he meant by returning to the city. If I casually answered him and he continued to ask, I might give myself away. Seeing that I didn't reply, the dog-headed man wasn't angry and continued to explain. "Oh, friend, don't misunderstand. I'm called Namu and I live in the Green Water Village at the end of the desert. I've never seen you in the village before. What's your name? Where do you live? Are you returning to the city?" From his words, I still couldn't guess the style of this place. However, if I continued to remain silent, it might arouse his suspicions. After thinking for a while, I pretended to be panicking and said, I don't know where I live. I've been wandering with my master since I was young. Today, when I was traveling with my master, I suddenly met my master's old enemy. When they were fighting, I was affected and fainted. When I woke up, I was alone and my master was nowhere to be found. I've been searching for him for 2 days in the desert, but I haven't seen a single person. Luckily, I met you. I tried my best to avoid the dog-headed man tribe in this fabricated experience to prevent him from finding any loopholes. However, the details were extremely vague. I didn't know if this dog-headed man named Namu would be suspicious. I felt apprehensive. After Namu heard what I said, he sighed and looked at me with pity. He said sorrowfully, "The monster realm is like this. The weak are prey to the strong. Who asked our tribe to be so weak and always be invaded by other tribes? Back then, my parents were also kidnapped by other tribes. I don't know if they're dead or alive. You're lucky that my master is nowhere to be found. Even if you're free, why are you still looking for him?" I was stunned when I heard that. I didn't expect my luck to be so good. The dog-headed man's parents happened to have the same experience as me. From the looks of it, he should have completely believed my words. I hid the joy in my heart and pretended to be confused. I didn't say anything and only shook my head. My expression obviously attracted Namu's sympathy. He patted my shoulder and continued, "Listen to me. You just have to find a place to live and forget about the past. The dog-headed man slaves in Rock City are worth less than half a gold coin. Since your master is a powerful monster, he definitely won't care about a small slave like you. Don't worry. Rock City. This should be the city that he was referring to when he said, 'Return to the city,' right?" I secretly noted it down in my heart, but didn't say anything. After a long while, I hesitantly nodded my head. Namu instantly became happy. He heavily patted my shoulder and laughed. "That's right. Being a free dog-headed man is more important than anything else." After laughing, he didn't wait for my reply and continued to ask, "What do you plan to do after this? If you don't have a place to go, you can follow me back to the village to recover from your injuries. Afterwards, I'll think of a way to find something for you to do. You'll definitely be able to support yourself." That was my original plan. After hearing him say that, I was naturally happy. However, after remaining silent for a while, I nodded my head, agreeing to his suggestion. Namu was instantly elated. The way he addressed me had already changed to brother. He told me to stand there and not move while he pulled the frightened monster over. He insisted that I ride the monster and follow him back to the village. I lowered my head to take a look. This monster didn't look any different from the dogs in the outside world. However, its body was much sturdier. It was almost as tall as a human. It didn't look like a dog, but more like a pony. It was different from Namu, who didn't put up any defenses. This monster that looked like a dog was obviously very vigilant. After Namu brought it over, Its gaze was filled with hostility. It got closer to my body and sniffed twice. The hostility in its eyes didn't disappear, but instead became stronger. It even growled at me and revealed its fangs. I instantly became vigilant. Dogs have a very sensitive sense of smell. It was possible that it smelled something strange from my body. This was a problem. I didn't know if Namu would be suspicious. While I was thinking, Namu extended his hand and pressed on the dog's head. He shouted, "What are you roaring for?" "This is me." "That's right, brother, what's your name?" As he said that, he turned to look at me. I couldn't think of a name in such a short amount of time, so I directly used Duoji's name. Namu nodded and said to the dog, "This is my brother, Duoji. When you see him in the future, treat it like you're seeing me. You're not allowed to roar at him. Do you understand?" Logically speaking, Namu and the dog were from the same race. I didn't know what their relationship was, but after hearing Namu's words, the hostility in the dog's eyes dissipated a little. After that, with Namu's help, I successfully rode the dog. I followed him to the front of the sand dune and slowly walked back. Namu seemed to be very happy along the way as he continuously introduced the situation of Greenwater Village to me. He even jokingly told me that I was extremely handsome. When we returned to the village, he would introduce a few pretty girls from the tribe to me. Chapter 904. As we laughed along the way, Nam introduced the situation of Greenwater Village to me. The dog-headed people were extremely weak in the monster race. Even though there were many of them, they were basically bullied by the other monster race no matter where they went. It was also because of this reason that their tribe was forced to settle at the edge of the desert, which was the Greenwater Village that he mentioned. There were close to 1,000 dog-headed people in Greenwater Village. The one with the highest cultivation was their chief, who was also the village chief of Greenwater Village. He had a cultivation at the peak of the monster spirit realm. After talking about the village chief, Nam proudly introduced himself. He said that he had the cultivation of a monster soldier when he was 6 years old, and that he was only a step away from reaching the monster spirit realm. He was the youth with the highest cultivation in Greenwater Village, and was also the youth that the girls in the village liked the most. I didn't pay attention to his boastful appearance, and instead pondered about the monster soldier and monster spirit that he mentioned. Even though I was heavily injured, I still had a strand of my spiritual sense left. I could easily find out that Nam was only at the dragon-seeking realm and hadn't reached the pressure point ceiling realm. Using this analogy, monster soldiers were equivalent to dragon-seeking and monster spirits were pressure point ceiling. Even though this name was different from the human race, the monster race's body structure wasn't much different from the human race. Their realms and stages of cultivation were similar as well. It was just that the attributes of the monster and witch energies were different. After understanding this problem, my heart calmed down a bit. In Greenwater Village, the strongest person was only the village chief at the peak of the pressure point ceiling realm. Even with my current broken body, a pressure point ceiling realm cultivator wouldn't be able to deal with me easily. At the very least, I shouldn't encounter any danger in Greenwater Village. After interacting with him for a short period of time, I had a general understanding of Nam's personality. He had a pure mind and wouldn't think too much. Thus, I had an idea. I asked him if he knew where the monster realm and the human realm were connected, how far it was from here, and if the monster race could easily leave the monster realm. Even though I decided to stay here to recuperate, I still had to leave this place in the end. The earlier I understood the problem, the earlier I could come up with a plan. After hearing my question, Nam's eyes widened. He asked me in shock, "You want to go to the human realm?" He reacted quickly this time. However, he didn't wait for my reply and shook his head. I heard from the village chief that the human race is extremely ugly and they feed on the monster race. A long time ago, many of the demon clan were killed by the human clan. We finally managed to wipe out the human clan, but who would have thought that there would be a change in the demon realm not long ago, and it would be connected to a place full of humans. We are all afraid of being conscripted to fight against the human clan, so why would you want to go? When I asked this question, I had already thought of a reason. Thus, I pretended to be hesitant and replied, Because I heard Master say that he wants to go to the human race's territory. I don't know where the human race's territory is, so I wanted to ask. Hearing what I said, Nam's face was filled with disappointment. He pointed at me and shouted, "Why are you so stupid?" I said, "Monster Nam's face, I's village people's monster race. If you follow me back to Greenwater Village, you won't be my servant anymore. You'll be my good brother in Greenwater Village. Do OG." I nodded hesitantly and didn't continue to ask. It was obvious that Nam didn't know the answer. I could only see if I could find any clues after arriving at Greenwater Village. We continued to walk in the desert for more than 2 hours until dusk. Finally, we reached the Greenwater Village that he had mentioned. The village was really at the edge of the desert. However, the strange thing was that there wasn't a single grain of sand in the village. It was covered with vegetation. Even if there was a strong wind in the desert, it would stop at the border of Greenwater Village. It was a mystical scene. Looking at the lush greenery in front of me, I felt much better. I sat on the back of the dog and followed Nam through the dense forest. We arrived at a village. It was dinner time. Greenwater Village had smoke rising from the chimneys. It didn't look any different from Human Village. I finally calmed down. I was worried that if the monster race was a bloodthirsty bunch, my future days wouldn't be easy. Nam saw that I was in a daze and patted the butt of the dog I was sitting on. He urged, "Let's hurry back. If we delay any longer, we won't be able to make it for dinner. You must be hungry, right?" Following his words, the dog quickened its pace and started running. Nam also ran beside me. His speed didn't lag behind at all. After walking for a short while, there were other villagers with different appearances that appeared on the village road. Nam seemed to be very familiar with them, as he warmly greeted them along the way. However, the strange thing was that when these people saw me, none of them asked him about my background. They only glanced at me a few times before looking away. I asked Nam suspiciously. He waved his hand nonchalantly and told me that most of the villagers thought that I was an expert that he had invited back. Without waiting for me to ask, he continued to tell me that he had left to look for a senior from the Sand Scorpion tribe that lived in seclusion in the desert. He wanted to get his guidance so that he could successfully raise his cultivation to the monster rank. Saying that, Nam's face showed some distress. He sighed and told me that it would be time for the entrance exam for Rock City Sod Academy. He was about to turn 18. If he couldn't reach the monster rank before that, he wouldn't be able to be accepted in his Sod Academy. Nam's eyes were filled with desire and unwillingness. He continued to say, "It has been many years since anyone from Greenwater Village got into Sod Academy. I'm the one with the most hope. If I can't get in, Uncle Chu Wong, the village chief, and my grandmother will be very disappointed." Nam, who had always been happy, was obviously depressed. He didn't say anything and continued to walk forward with his dog. Very quickly, we arrived at his house. Nam's house was very ordinary. There were 3 thatched cottages in a fenced courtyard. There was smoke coming from the back of the house. Nam stood in front of the door and called out a few times. An old woman came out to open the door. Previously, Nam had told me that he and his grandmother depended on each other since he was young. This should be his grandmother. Seeing Nam return, his grandmother seemed very happy. She hastily asked him if he was injured outside. After knowing that Nam was fine, his grandmother heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she shifted her gaze to me. When she saw me, she praised me in surprise. What a handsome young man. I awkwardly turned my head to look at Nam. I recalled what he had said before. It was obvious that this guy's sense of beauty was passed down from his grandmother. After praising me, his grandmother asked about my identity. Nam carefully explained what had happened today and the information he had gotten from me. Grandmother nodded and didn't ask anything. She enthusiastically brought us into the thatched cottage. The furnishings in the thatched cottage were simple. There was a square table and a few wooden stools. In the middle, there was a steaming hot piece of boiled meat. It looked crude and simple, but it was cooked. Moreover, my body was injured and my stamina was severely depleted. A large amount of meat was the best way to replenish my stamina. After we finished dinner, his grandmother arranged a room for me to stay in. From start to finish, she didn't question my identity. It seemed that Nam's warm personality was also inherited from his grandmother. The monster race obviously lacked cloth and other items. This could be seen from their clothes. Thus, in the thatched cottage that my grandmother arranged for me, there was only straw on the bed and no bedding. In such an environment, I naturally didn't have any room to be picky. Very quickly, I laid on the bed to rest. Not long after I laid down, Nam, who had just left, knocked on the door and came in. He held a bottle of black substance in his hand. He said that it was a miraculous medicine for treating external injuries. After applying it on the injured area, it would be healed the next day. He had specially brought it for me to use. Since Nam was so warm-hearted, I naturally couldn't reject him. I allowed him to apply the black ointment on my injured area. Not long after, I felt a refreshing and numbing sensation. The pain had also dissipated by a lot. This ointment didn't look very good and even had a slight stench. However, its effects were quite good. Even among the human race, it was a rare medicine. I opened my mouth to ask what this ointment was. Nam whispered to me, "It's called black mud ointment. Uncle Chu Wong and I picked it up a few months ago while hunting in the dense forest outside the village. I've seen it in the Thad Academy selection. I heard that this ointment is very precious and can't be bought with money. Uncle Chu Wong knows that I often get injured during cultivation, so he gave it to me." I had asked Nam about this Uncle Chu Wong when we were eating. He was the captain of the Greenwater Village's hunting team. His cultivation was the same as the village chief at the peak of the monster race. All the children in the village, including Nam, had trained with him since they were young. From Greenwater Village's situation and Nam's cultivation, this black mud ointment was indeed very precious to them. For Nam to take it out for me to use, it meant that he really treated me as a good brother. I was slightly moved, but Nam didn't seem to care. After telling me to rest well, he went to the courtyard to meditate and cultivate. According to him, the Thad Academy selection was less than a few months away. This time, he didn't have the opportunity to meet the Sand Scorpion race's ancestor, so he could only work hard and strive to advance to the monster rank before the selection. Chapter 905. The next morning, I woke up early. Even though my muscles and bones were still sore, I had slept very soundly last night. My spirit had also recovered by a lot. I closed my eyes and checked my body. The veins in my body were still damaged, but the injuries on my body had recovered by a lot. It seemed that the black mud cream was really effective. I got off the bed and moved around the room. Just as I was about to push the door open, Nam excitedly ran in. Seeing that I had woken up, he smiled and asked me how I was feeling. I roughly explained my body's condition. After Nam heard it, he pulled me out of the courtyard. As we walked, he told me that he would bring me to the village chief's house to see if he had a way to treat my internal injuries. I naturally couldn't reject Nam's enthusiasm. After a while, we arrived at the village chief's house. After a few shouts outside the door, an old man with a white beard slowly walked out of the house. Almost all of the hair on his body had fallen off, but he looked very kind. Seeing that it was Nam, the village chief revealed a smile and asked Nam if he had found the hidden senior from the Sand Scorpion tribe. After knowing that there was no result, the village chief sighed. "Little Nam, you don't need to be depressed. These few days, I've been researching a miraculous medicine to increase your cultivation. I'm only missing the last herb to complete it. After the medicine is completed, swallow it, and you'll have a chance to advance to the monster rank in 3 months." After hearing that, Nam's depressed expression instantly turned into surprise and joy. He hastily expressed his gratitude. Unlike Nam's happiness, I watched from the side and felt that the so-called miraculous medicine might not be effective. After all, the village chief only had the cultivation of a monster. If he wanted to help Nam advance to the monster rank, he might not be able to do so. For example, if I wanted to help someone become a sealing celestial master, it might be possible. However, if I wanted to help someone advance to the monster rank, it would be impossible. After communicating with Nam, the village chief turned to look at me and asked Nam who I was. Naturally, Nam wouldn't hide anything and told me everything about my background. He also told me the reason why I came today. After the village chief heard it, he didn't suspect my identity. Instead, he patted my head with pity and sighed. Such a handsome young man. Luckily, you escaped from the devil's clutches. Follow me in. I never thought that the village chief would have such a sense of beauty. At this moment, I understood that it was most likely because I didn't understand the beauty and ugliness of the kobolds. With Nam's appearance, he should be a handsome guy among the kobolds. I followed the village elder into the courtyard. Before we entered the house, I smelled the strong scent of herbs. On the way here, Nam told me that the village chief was a person who understood medicine. That was why he brought me here to ask for medicine. After entering the house, he saw that there were many wooden shelves in the house, and the wooden shelves were filled with medicinal herbs. I don't know much about pharmacology, and the monster race's medicinal herbs are not related to the human world. So, after carefully looking at them, I couldn't recognize any of them. At this moment, a stone pot was placed on top of the fire. Within the stone pot, a dark green medicinal liquid was already boiling. It seemed that the medicine in the wok was the miraculous medicine that could raise one's cultivation that the village chief had mentioned. Beside him, Nam also noticed this. After entering the room, he stared at the pot of boiling potion with a burning gaze. The village head coughed and ignored him. He turned to me and asked, "Young man, tell me about your situation." The body structure of the monster race and the human race were similar, so the nature of their cultivation was the same. So, after thinking for a while, I told him the truth. After the village chief heard, he frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. When my heaven veins were shattered, I used the true dragon saliva to reconstruct them, while the fatty used the power of the monster pill. These two items were extremely precious and rare. It was normal for the village chief, who was only at the peak of the pressure point realm, to be unable to think of a solution. I didn't really care, but Nam, who was at the side, felt that the village chief was also helpless. He apologetically turned his head and gave me a comforting look. Since I couldn't think of a solution, I prepared to change the topic and see if I could get more information from the village chief. However, before I could speak, the village chief, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly opened his mouth. "Handsome young man, I can't do anything about your injury, but I've heard that there is an extremely precious herb called Thousand Leaves Aroma. It will be of great help to your situation. If you can find this herb, you might be able to cure it." Thousand Leaves Aroma? I didn't have much hope, but the village chief's tone was very serious. It was clear that he wasn't joking. I was pleasantly surprised. It didn't matter if I could find it or not. As long as I knew its name, I would have a goal. I hurriedly asked the village chief, "Where can I find this Thousand Leaves Aroma?" The village chief told me that a few decades ago, a Thousand Leaves Aroma appeared in the forest outside of Greenwater Village. At that time, many people heard the news and went there. I didn't know if it had been taken away or not. When I heard this, I felt a little strange. If it was a precious herb and someone had found it, why hadn't it been taken away? After asking, I understood that this herb took dozens of years to mature. Moreover, it was very difficult to transplant. Even if it was found, it wouldn't be taken away. It would have to wait until it matured before it could be harvested. Moreover, according to the village chief, that Thousand Leaves Aroma should have matured in the last 1 or 2 years. It's possible that it's still in its original location. Let's go and search for it. Perhaps we can find it. After listening to him, before I could say anything, Nam happily replied, "That's great. I've been to the forest outside of the village with Uncle Chu Wong a few times. I'm very familiar with the road. I'll take you there immediately." The village chief nodded. "It's very dangerous in the forest. I'll let little Nam accompany you. There are a few kinds of spirit herbs in the back mountain. You guys can help me pick them. With those spirit herbs, I should be able to refine the elixir for little Nam." After listening to me, Nam became even happier and quickly agreed. Then, the village chief drew a picture of the spirit herbs and gave it to Nam. After receiving the drawing, Nam was even more anxious than I was. He pulled my arm and wanted to walk out of the house. At this time, the village chief stopped us and warned us that after nightfall, the fierce beasts in the forest would come out to hunt for food. He told us that we must leave before sunset. I didn't know if Nam listened or not, but he casually agreed. He pulled me out of the village chief's house and ran towards the forest outside. Standing in the village, we could see the forest in the distance. However, with our current strength, we walked for nearly half an hour before we finally reached the place. After entering the forest, under the shade of the trees, the surrounding temperature dropped a lot. The ancient and wild aura was also much denser. This kind of environment was obviously very suitable for the growth of herbs. Nam led the way. This place was surrounded by the forest, so it was hard to tell the direction. After following Nam for another 15 minutes, we finally stopped at the foot of a small mountain. Nam told me that the small mountain in front of us was the back mountain that the village chief had mentioned. The spirit herbs that the village chief wanted should be here. The thousand leaves aroma should also be nearby. While talking, he took out the drawing that the village chief had given me and showed it to me. He said that we were going to search for these spirit herbs together. I picked up the drawing and carefully looked at it. Although the village chief's drawing was rough, he had drawn the characteristics of each herb. In addition, the thousand leaves aroma was also included. The village chief had specially circled it and marked it out. When I heard the name thousand leaves aroma, I felt that it was similar to the 7-star mugwort that I had obtained in the Green Hill country. After looking at the drawing, I realized that it was indeed the case. However, the difference was that the thousand leaves aroma had thick roots and lush branches. Compared to the 7-star mugwort, it looked more like a tree. The back mountain was only 100 meters high. Nam's body was sturdy, so he didn't even pant as he walked in front. Although my physical strength had recovered a little, it was hard to avoid affecting my injuries while walking, so I was panting a little. Luckily, Nam was careful. After seeing my tired appearance, he stopped to rest for a while and went to check the surrounding herbs. We walked and stopped like this until noon, but we only found one useful herb. I was a little anxious. The village chief had said that after nightfall, there would be fierce beasts roaming around. At that time, we had to go back. With this kind of efficiency, I didn't know how many days we would need to find 1,000 leaves aroma in such a big mountain. Chapter 906. Namu's expression darkened when he saw the appearance of the half-beast man. He pulled me to leave, but just as I took a step, I heard the half-beast man call out his name. Obi, isn't this the genius of Greenwater Village, Namu? Namu's footsteps stopped, and a trace of anger flashed across his face. I asked him about the identity of the half-beast men. They're from a jackal tribe from the neighboring village. Namu turned his head and glared at me before continuing. These jackal tribe members are despicable and lowly. They often bully our sisters in the village. When a village chief found out about this, he taught them a lesson. I was also present at that time. I then understood that it was the same as the human race. There were such hooligans everywhere. These kinds of people were the hardest to deal with, as they found joy in finding trouble with others. No wonder Namu's expression turned ugly when he saw them. From their unbridled attitude, their cultivation shouldn't be any lower than Namu's. I sensed their aura and found that it was indeed so. Their cultivation was the same as Namu's. The leader was slightly higher, but he hadn't reached the monster spirit realm. Namu was the strongest among the younger generation of Greenwater Village. From this, it could be seen that the Jackal tribe's power was much higher than the Dog tribe's. I naturally wasn't interested in their grudges, but when I looked at them, I suddenly noticed that the leader of the Jackal tribe had a few green leaves that were similar to the 1,000 leaves AI Ling in the picture. It couldn't be such a coincidence that the 1,000 leaves AI Ling was snatched away by them. Originally, I didn't intend to fight with them, as this was the monster race's territory. It was better to avoid trouble, but if the 1,000 leaves AI Ling was taken away by them, then I must take it back. While I was thinking, the leader of the Jackal tribe jumped down from the monster's back and took the initiative to find trouble with me. He asked Namu, "Who is this brat? Why haven't I seen him in Greenwater Village before?" After saying that, he extended his hand and hugged my shoulder. He had a smile on his face as he continuously increased his strength. Even though I was heavily injured, my physical body had recovered a little. His strength naturally wasn't enough, so I didn't mind. However, Namu's face flushed red as he angrily shouted, "Gale, don't hurt my friend." As he spoke, Nam's body shook violently and he bared his teeth. Earlier on, Nam had introduced to me that the hound headmen's strongest trait was their mouthful of sharp teeth. It was a natural talent of their race. Although there was a gap between his cultivation level and Gale's, but if he was bitten by these sharp teeth, Gale wouldn't feel good. Gale immediately let go of me when he saw Nam suddenly making things difficult for him. He took the initiative to push Nam a few meters away. Then, with a face full of disgust, he shouted, "Obi, you lowly races are so rude." As he spoke, he continuously wiped the palm that he used to slap Nam on his chest. Nam ignored his disgusting face and quickly went to my side to ask about my situation. I stared at Gale's chest as I told Nam I was fine. During the short exchange between him and Nam, due to the intense movements of his body, the herb on his chest was revealed. This time, I could confirm that the herb on his chest was the 1,000 leaves arborvitae that we had painstakingly searched for. After confirming this, I started to think about how to snatch the herb from his hands. Without waiting for me to come up with an idea, Gale continued to ridicule me from the side. "Nam, although you houndhead men are a lowly race, you are still a genius among the houndhead men. How could you be friends with this kind of trash without any cultivation? I think that your village should really be removed. Your strength is getting weaker and weaker. Obi, you've really lost the face of our wolf clan." Nam had previously told me that their Green Water village, including Rock City, belonged to the wolf clan. That's why Gale said that. Hearing Gale's words, Nam's face became even angrier, but he still didn't flare up. He coldly replied, "Gale, don't think that you can be arrogant just because your sister entered Sada Academy. Whether my Green Water village is removed or not, it's not up to you." When Gale heard Nam's rebuttal, he didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and continued, "I've received insider information. If no one from your Green Water village passes Sada Academy selection this year, the City Lord will consider removing Green Water village. If that happens, the City Lord will consider removing Green Water village and turn it into a hunting ground." After saying that, he no longer paid attention to Nam, whose face was flushed with anger. He jumped back onto the monster beast and brought the two people with him down the mountain. After they left, Nam stood there motionlessly for a long time. It was obvious that he was in a bad mood. His face was filled with sadness, most likely related to Gale's words. I wanted Chinya AI Ling, but it was clear that Gale wouldn't give it to me. This matter could only be resolved by force. However, from the previous conversation, it was clear that the Jackal tribe's power was much greater than the Houndhead men's. If this matter brought trouble to the Houndhead men's tribe, then I would be letting Nam down. Therefore, I had to do this secretly. Actually, when Gale hugged my shoulder, I had already placed a Dao Qi imprint on his body. It was a small spell that I could easily cast with my current cultivation. As long as the imprint was there, I would be able to sense Gale's location. That's why I wasn't in a hurry. I asked Nam what was the reason behind the removal of Green Water Village. Hearing my question, the sadness on Nam's face deepened. He fiercely shouted, "Oh, bye," before telling me the story. He told me that the Houndhead Men tribe was born with power and status. Most of the Houndhead Men tribe were slaves of other monster races. In a monster race's world where power was everything, they were bullied. Their Green Water village was the best among the Houndhead Men tribe. However, in terms of power, they were still the weakest in the Rock City's jurisdiction. In the monster race, the strong preyed on the weak. Basically, every city had an elimination law. Every few years, the village with the weakest power would be removed from the surrounding villages. Without the protection of the village tribe, the villagers would lose their homes. They could only enter the city and sell their bodies to become slaves of other monster races. This was also the reason why the majority of the Houndhead men were slaves. Not only the Houndhead men, but the majority of the weaker monster race were slaves of the stronger monster races. Green Water Village's current situation was entirely due to the village chief and Uncle Chu Wong's hard work. However, ever since the barrier between the monster race and the human race was removed, the monster race placed more emphasis on the power of the younger generation. Hence, the elimination law became more stringent. It was linked to the entrance exam of that academy. After saying that, Nam was sad and full of self-blame. It's all my fault for being playful and not working hard to cultivate. Otherwise, I would definitely be able to pass that academy's entrance exam and save my village. After listening to him, I understood why he was so eager to pass that academy's entrance exam. It turned out that he was carrying such a heavy responsibility. I pondered. Nam had saved my life. With my original cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for me to help him increase his realm. However, I couldn't do that under the current situation. It seemed that I had to quickly get Chinya AI Ling from Gale. As I pondered, I tried to sense the position of the mark that I had left on Gale's body. He wasn't too far away from us. In order to avoid suspicion, it wasn't a good time to make a move. I couldn't bear to look at Nam's sad expression, so I changed the topic and asked him curiously. Just now, Gale kept saying, "Obi." You also said it just now. What does that word mean? After hearing that, the sadness on Nam's face dissipated. He awkwardly asked me, "You've never heard of that word before?" I shook my head. Nam embarrassedly smiled. After thinking for a while, he stammered, "It's probably because you've been by Master's side since young that you rarely come into contact with other people. This word, how do I say it? It's something that you would say when you're talking about something, but it's not a good word. You mustn't learn to say it." Actually, even without Nam's explanation, I could roughly understand that this word was most likely a vulgar word that was related to the lower body organs. It was used to vent one's emotions. I purposely asked to dilute Nam's sadness. Seeing that his expression had recovered, I chuckled and didn't continue the topic. Instead, I suggested to Nam to search the surroundings to see if we could find any herbs. It was obvious that Gale's Chinya AI Ling was found nearby. If we could find some, it would be best if we didn't clash with Gale for the time being. That was why I suggested it. However, before the two of us could do anything, there was a sudden gust of wind and a fishy smell permeated the air. Chapter 907. Before we set off to search for the herb, the village chief had specially told us that we had to leave the forest before nightfall. Otherwise, ferocious beasts would appear. I didn't expect that we would encounter a ferocious beast before nightfall. After Nam shouted, I didn't see any ferocious beasts appear. He pulled me and quickly ran down the mountain. However, after running for a few steps, Nam suddenly stopped. I found it strange and turned around to ask. Nam showed a bitter expression and pointed in front of us. I then realized that there were two walnut-sized eyes in the pine forest in front of us that were faintly emitting a green light. It turned out that the culprit was blocking our way. I pulled Nam and prepared to run up the mountain, but Nam didn't move. He shook his head at me. It's useless. The green arrow snake is extremely fast. It will catch up to us in a few steps. We were just going down the mountain. We didn't even run for a few steps before it circled in front of us. There's no point in turning back now. Green arrow snake. That should be the name of the monster in front of us. While I was thinking, Nam extended his hand and pulled me behind him. He took a deep breath and said, if we meet a green arrow snake, we can only fight and not run. Duo-G, stand here and don't move. Wait for me to deal with him. After he said that, he straightened his body, and an imposing aura surged from his body as he charged into the pine forest in front of us. His performance was very brave, but from the aura that the green arrow snake was emitting, its cultivation should be at the early stages of the pressure point ceiling stage. In terms of the monster race's cultivation, it would be the early stages of the monster race. Nam's current cultivation was only at the late stages of the monster soldier realm. It was obvious that he wasn't the green arrow snake's opponent. I was worried that something would happen to Nam, so I quickly followed behind him. When I reached the pine forest, the green arrow snake had already revealed itself from the bushes. Its body was about 3 meters long, and its scarlet tongue was flicking in and out. It was a clear indication of how powerful this ferocious beast was. Meeting on a narrow path, Nam was obviously ready to fight to the death. He didn't notice that I was following him and immediately pounced towards the green arrow snake. His speed was very fast, but compared to the green arrow snake, it was slow motion. When he was halfway there, the green arrow snake had already dodged his body at lightning speed. Its tail circled behind him and whipped him on the back. The thick snake tail was like a huge whip, tearing the clothes on Nam's back, leaving a thick, bloody mark. Nam was brave. After being hit by the tail whip, he only grunted and got up from the ground. Without saying a word, he continued to pounce towards the green arrow snake's position. But this time, he was cautious and did not use all his strength. Halfway through, he saw that the green arrow snake had dodged, so he changed his direction and continued to chase. Although the green arrow snake was slightly stronger, it did not seem to be willing to fight Nam head-on. Instead, the two sides were in a stalemate for the time being. The demon soldier cultivation and the demon spirit cultivation of the green arrow snakes were evenly matched. Nam's morale was greatly boosted as he continued to roar. The aura on his body grew stronger and stronger. I shook my head from the side. On the surface, it looked like they were evenly matched, but in reality, this was just the green arrow snake's hunting instincts. Finding the most efficient way to obtain food had always been the only way to survive in the wild. With the green arrow snake's speed, Nam could not hurt it at all. Once its strength was exhausted, it could easily finish off Nam. After confirming that Nam did not have the ability to finish off the green arrow snake, I prepared to make my move. The remaining cultivation in my body was not as high as Nam's, so brute force was naturally not enough. Furthermore, I did not want to reveal my methods. After thinking for a while, I took out a talisman from my Xianglu bag. Because the Feng Shui metaphysics shop sold talismans, I would make some talismans every once in a while. The talismans in my Xianglu bag were the ones I made last time. Before I could send them back to the metaphysics shop, the mountain and sea realm opened, so these talismans were left in my Xianglu bag. Since talismans were created with enough spiritual power, only a small amount of spiritual power was needed to activate them. With my current cultivation, these talismans were the only methods I could use. The talisman I took out was a yellow talisman of the lowest grade, called the lightning talisman. This type of lightning talisman was similar to the Heaven's lightning talisman in Dragon and Tiger Mountain, but its power was much weaker. It could only summon a normal bolt of lightning. Its power was at the early stage of the pressure point realm, similar to the green arrow snake's cultivation. Within the monster realm, regardless of whether it was the monster race or the beasts, their powers were different from the outside world. However, the attributes of their powers were similar. The green arrow snake's body was covered in black gas. Its power was obviously related to the word evil. Using lightning techniques to deal with it was the most suitable. With a lightning talisman in my hand, I waited for Nam and the green arrow snake to finish another round. Nam's back was facing me, and the green arrow snake's attention was focused on Nam. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I flicked my finger and infused the remaining energy in my body into the lightning talisman. In an instant, a twisting bolt of lightning appeared in the sky above the pine forest and struck down at the green arrow snake. The green arrow snake was extremely fast, but no matter how fast it was, it couldn't be faster than the lightning. It didn't even have time to react before the lightning struck its body. The lightning technique broke the evil, but it didn't have enough power. After striking down, it didn't kill the green arrow snake, but only numbed its body. The black gas around it also dissipated by half. The lightning that appeared out of nowhere naturally startled Nam, but his battle instincts as a beastman quickly reminded him. Taking advantage of its weakness, Nam's figure flashed and appeared in front of the green arrow snake. Taking advantage of the paralysis of its body, Nam condensed a demonic aura in his hand and turned it into a hand knife, chopping straight at the head of the green arrow snake. Even though there was a difference in power, the green arrow snake's cultivation had almost completely dissipated under the lightning technique. Nam's blade wasn't something that it could withstand. With a cry, the green arrow snake's body started to twitch. After flopping a few times, it was lifeless. Nam's gaze was a little dazed. After killing the green arrow snake, he looked around. It was obvious that the lightning had given him a lot of confusion. Seeing that I was standing nearby, Nam didn't have any suspicions. He just asked me if I had seen the lightning. I nodded and pretended to be shocked. After staying silent for a while, I said, "This is the peak of the mountain. The sky is a little dark today, so it's normal for lightning to appear. After my reminder, Nam instantly found a reason and nodded. The dazed expression on his face dissipated and he smiled. It seems that the green arrow snake is really unlucky to be struck by lightning. How unlucky is it? I grinned and continued. It's not really unlucky. Even without the lightning, I saw that you were about to defeat it. It's really unlucky to have met you today. Hearing what I said, Nam's face reddened. However, he didn't explain and only chuckled as a tacit agreement. I couldn't tell that this brat had some vanity hidden in his simple and honest appearance. However, this was normal as he was still young. Which child in their teens wasn't vain? After randomly changing the topic, Nam wasn't curious about the lightning anymore. He turned to me and said excitedly, I heard from the village chief that when a beast reaches the monster spirit realm, its body will form a beast core. I wonder if this green arrow snake has one. Duo G, wait by the side. I'll look for it. If I can find a beast core, we'll be rich. Beast core? I frowned. When the fatty's meridians were broken, I tried to find a beast core to heal him. At that time, I knew that the monster race would have a beast core. What was the beast core that Nam mentioned? What did it have to do with the beast core? The beast core could repair meridians, which was what I needed the most at that moment. If the beast core had similar effects, it would be a blessing from the heavens. However, I gave up on that thought after thinking for a while. The beast core was something that was formed in the body of a young god, celestial master. The green arrow snake in front of me was just a simple acupuncture point. The difference in power was too great. Even if it could form something similar to the beast core, the effects would be far from it. As I thought about all this, I stood at the side and watched Nam break open the green arrow snake's corpse bit by bit. From its head, he took out a badly mangled object that was the size of a fingernail. He rubbed it on the animal skin on his body, revealing the ink inside. Chapter 908. Yellow Level Beast Core. I concentrated and sensed it. There was a pure power inside, the fingernail-sized black ball. This power seemed to be used to seal an acupoint, but it seemed to be stronger than the green arrow snake's cultivation. Since I couldn't see anything special about it, I asked Nam, what is a yellow level beast core? Hearing my question, Nam found it strange. You don't know? I shook my head. Only then did Nam react. It seems that you didn't have much contact with the outside world at your previous master's place. As he said that, he carefully put the yellow level beast core into his pocket. Then, he continued to explain, beast cores are divided into 4 ranks according to the amount of power they contain. Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow. Normally, when a killer reaches the monster spirit realm, they will start to condense a beast core. However, the beast cores at this stage are basically unranked. Normally, they will only condense a yellow level beast core when they are close to the monster general level. I really don't know what this green arrow snake ate to actually be able to condense a yellow level beast core. At this moment, Nam had completely forgotten about the conflict with the jackal tribe. He smiled, revealing his white teeth, and continued to tell me, an unranked beast core can only be exchanged for 1 gold coin. However, a yellow level beast core can be exchanged for at least 30 gold coins. An increase of over 30 times. I nodded. I didn't find it strange, so I casually asked him about the price of a higher-ranked beast core. This time, Nam shook his head. There aren't many higher-ranked beast cores in Rock City. The price is impossible to estimate. However, the most important thing about a beast core isn't that it can be exchanged for gold coins. Most of the time, even if you have gold coins, you might not be able to buy a beast core. Every beast core contains a very strong power. With this yellow level beast core, if the village chief adds into the 1,000 Leaves arrowroot, it will definitely be of great help to your injuries. At this moment, he was still concerned about my injuries. This made me very touched, but after thinking about it, I felt a little embarrassed to accept it. I opened my mouth and said to Nam, the power contained in the beast core will definitely be of help to your cultivation. Right now, you are at the crucial moment of breaking through to the monster spirit realm. This beast core should be used by you first. After Nam heard this, he hesitated for a moment. It was obvious that he could not reject this temptation, but he also felt apologetic. He stuttered and could not say anything for a long time. I grinned at the side and comforted him. You should use the beast core to raise your cultivation first. In the future, when your cultivation is high, we can go hunt monsters to obtain the beast cores. At that time, my injuries will also be able to recover. Hearing me say that, Nam finally found a way out. He quickly nodded and solemnly promised, when my cultivation increases, I'll definitely go hunt monsters. I'll at least find you a yellow-level beast core. I nodded, but didn't care about his promise. Nam had already said that a normal yellow-grade beast core would be condensed in the body of a fierce beast that was close to a demon general. Demon general cultivation corresponded to glory of knowledge. In other words, if one wanted to obtain a yellow-grade beast core, they had to kill vicious beasts that were close to glory of knowledge. Even if Nam successfully advanced to the demon spirit realm, it would be impossible for him to hunt such a fierce beast in a short period of time. I'll have to figure out myself. With my current strength, I could only use yellow-gray talismans. Although I'm not afraid of monsters below the demon general rank, it won't be easy to kill them. I'll have to think about it carefully. Even though I won't be able to obtain the beast core in a short period of time, I was still rather excited. After all, I found a way to recover from my injuries. Compared to the yellow-gray beast core, this was more important. After waiting for Nam's excitement to subside, I reminded him, it's getting late. We have to hurry and gather the herbs. If we drag it until nighttime, I'm afraid that there will be even more fierce beasts. Hearing me say that, Nam instantly retracted the smile on his face. He quickly stood up and nodded. That's right, that's right. Let's hurry and search. The next time we meet a fierce beast, we won't be so lucky. As he said that, he started to search around. At the same time, he comforted me. Duo G, you don't have to be anxious. Let's work hard and we'll definitely be able to find the herb that can heal your injuries. This brat probably thought that I was in a hurry to find Chinya AI Ling. I smiled and didn't explain, but continued to search around with him. The herbs that the village chief wanted were all common items. We quickly found more than half of them. During the process of gathering the herbs, I kept sensing the chi imprint that I left on the bodies of the jackal clansmen. After we finished searching the forest, Nam continued to lead me forward. I sensed that the jackal clansmen had already left the back of the mountain and were heading out of the forest. The forest beside Greenwater Village was extremely large, but the back of the mountain was very small. After leaving the back of the mountain, the jackal clansmen shouldn't be suspicious of us anymore. Thus, I pretended to have a stomachache and told Nam that I needed to relieve myself. I told him to continue searching for the herbs. Since Nam wanted to use the yellow-grade beast core, he felt guilty towards me and was trying his best to find Chinya AI Ling. After hearing what I said, he didn't suspect anything and nodded before continuing forward. After he had gone far away, I quickly rushed down the mountain. Even though Gale and the other 3 jackal clansmen were riding monsters, their speed was very slow. When I reached the foot of the mountain, I could see their swaying silhouettes moving forward. I quietly followed them. At the same time, I randomly picked one of the herbs that I had just gathered. After crushing it, I smeared it on my body. Herbs usually had a strong smell. After smearing it on my body was filled with the pungent smell of herbs, concealing my aura. I didn't do this because I was worried that Gale and the others would discover me. With their cultivation, it was impossible for them to have such an ability. I was more worried about the monsters that they were riding. In order to not bring trouble to Greenwater Village and obtain Chinya AI Ling, I could only use the most secretive method. After concealing my aura, I quickened my pace and quickly closed the distance between me and the jackal clansmen. In this range, the power of the yellow-gray talisman was enough to reach me. I took out 4 talismans from the Xianglu bag. 2 of them were the lightning talismans that I had just used, while the other 2 were the fierce sun talismans. The lightning talisman could create drought lightning, while the fierce sun talisman could create flames. When lightning and fire intersected, their powers would be enhanced. With my current power, I didn't dare to be careless when facing the 3 jackal clansmen that were close to the monster's cultivation. I had to make sure that I would make them lose consciousness. After injecting my spirit into the talismans, the 4 yellow-gray talismans were simultaneously activated. In the clear sky, lightning and fire suddenly fell, heading straight for the 3 jackal clansmen. Gale and the other 2 obviously didn't react to this sudden scene. Their laughter abruptly stopped, and their bodies ignited in flames. Their consciousness was also temporarily lost due to the drought lightning. After confirming that they had closed their eyes, I quickly walked forward and used the gathering talisman to disperse the flames on their bodies. After that, I took out the herb from Gale's bosom. After carefully examining it, I confirmed that it was the Chinya AI Ling that the village elder had mentioned before carefully placing it in my bosom. Following that, I checked the bodies of the 3 jackal clansmen. After confirming that they had only fainted and weren't dead, I felt relieved and left. I didn't want to bring trouble to Greenwater Village, so I had to ensure that Gale and the others were alive. Otherwise, the deaths of the 3 youths would definitely incite the anger of the jackal clansmen. At that time, it would be hard to guarantee that they wouldn't find any clues. With my current power, I wouldn't be able to protect Greenwater Village. Even if I could protect them, it wouldn't be good to reveal my current cultivation in the monster race's territory. Now that everything was going according to plan, I didn't have anything to worry about. I quickly left the place and returned to the mountain. I quickly found Nam, who was still searching for herbs. Seeing that I had returned, Nam didn't ask why I had been gone for so long. He only said to me in distress, "I found all the herbs that the village elder wanted, but I still haven't found the Chinya AI Ling. But Duo G, you don't have to worry. There's still some time before it gets dark. Let's continue to search the mountaintop. We have to find it today, no matter what." Looking at his distressed expression, I mysteriously smiled and took out the Chinya AI Ling from my bosom. I told him that when I was going to the toilet, I accidentally found this herb. It was very similar to the Chinya AI Ling that the village elder had drawn. That's why I spent a lot of time to pick it up and let Nam take out the village elder's portrait to compare. Chapter 909. The monster race's belief was naturally the monster emperor Ling. This was something that Nam had told me previously in the village, which was why he was so emotional. No matter if it was the green arrow snake or the 1,000 leaves AI Ling, they had nothing to do with luck. However, from a certain point of view, I was the monster emperor Ling, so Nam's emotions weren't wrong. After obtaining the 1,000 leaves AI Ling, this trip was considered very successful. Since the sky was getting dark, we didn't dare to stay any longer. We quickly descended the mountain and headed back to Greenwater Village. Since I knew the location of Gale and the others, I specially advised Nam to head in another direction when we descended the mountain. As for whether the 3 jackal tribe members could wake up before the sky turned dark, it would depend on their luck. If they died in the mouth of the beasts, the jackal tribe members wouldn't be able to find Greenwater Village, even if they searched for them. When we returned to the village, before we reached the village chief's house, we saw him pacing back and forth in the courtyard. When we got closer and he saw us, he heaved a sigh of relief and asked us why we returned so late. Seeing that the village chief was a little angry, Nam hurriedly recounted what happened today. When it came to the yellow-level beast core, the village chief's face was stunned. His previous displeasure completely disappeared as he urged Nam to take out the beast core. After Nam handed the pigeon egg-sized beast Dan to the village chief, his old face was already smiling so widely that his eyebrows couldn't be seen. He carefully put away the beast Dan and hurriedly urged Nam and me to enter the house. After entering the house, the village chief took out the beast core. After examining it for a long time under the dim light of the oil lamp, he smiled in relief. With his beast core, adding it into the pill I'm refining, little Nam will definitely have no problem reaching the level of a demon. It was just as I had guessed. The beast pill contained pure monster power and was extremely useful for increasing one's cultivation. After the village chief finished speaking, Nam was a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, he said to the village chief, "Can you split the beast pill into 2 portions?" I think half will be enough. The remaining half can be added to Duoji's herbs so that he can recover from his injuries. Nam's word surprised me. He was obviously embarrassed that he had taken the beast pill for himself. At this moment, the village chief's face darkened. He turned to look at me and shook his head. How can the beast pill be split into 2 portions? Moreover, Duoji's injuries can't be healed by this kind of beast pill. He can only slowly recuperate. Namu was the hope of the entire village, so the village chief's thoughts were naturally all on him. Regardless of whether the beast core could be split into 2 portions, I was afraid that he wouldn't give it to me. He probably thought that I was the one who asked Nam to say that when he gave me the side eye. I smiled wryly and didn't say anything. Nam did not notice the village chief's emotions and continued to ask, "This beast core is useless? Could it be that the other beast cores were useful?" I promised Duoji that after my strength increases, I will help him hunt for beast cores and heal his injuries. The village chief frowned again, but this time he didn't glare at me. After thinking for a moment, he answered, "To cure his injuries, he needs at least an earth level or above beast core, or a lot of profound level beast cores. A yellow level beast core might also have a little effect, but the effect definitely won't be great." Nam's eyes widened. Earth grade? Mystic grade? How is this possible? It was obvious that this answer was completely out of Nam's expectations. After asking that question, he immediately became dejected. He even looked at me apologetically. It was obvious that he didn't think that he would be able to fulfill his promise. Compared to Nam's dejection, I didn't feel dejected at all. Instead, my spirit was lifted. Previously, I had guessed that the beast core would have the same power as a monster core and would be able to heal my injuries. Now that I had confirmed this from the village chief, I instantly felt that my hope had increased. Regardless of where to find high-level beast cores, with this direction, I would definitely be able to find a solution for the rest of the matters. Nam remained silent and didn't say anything. The village chief glanced at me as if he couldn't bear it. After sighing, he changed the topic and told us that the pill that he was refining for Nam required 7 days to complete after adding the beast pellet. However, my 1,000 leaves AI Ling only needed to be slightly refined before I could use it. He told us to go back and rest first and come back tomorrow to take the medicine. At that time, he would help me sort out my body so that I could better absorb the medicine's power. Nam didn't want to give up and asked the village chief if the 1,000 leaves AI Ling could cure my injuries. The village chief shook his head and stayed silent for a while before saying, "Even though it won't be able to restore your meridians, it will at least be able to help you recover from your injuries." I nodded. It was fine as long as it could help me recover from my injuries. As for restoring my meridians, I would think of a way to get a beast core in the future. After bidding farewell to the village chief, Nam was in low spirits on the way back. Only when it was time to sleep did he suddenly run over and tell me that there were many beast cores in that academy. After he entered the academy, he would definitely think of a way to help me find high-level beast cores. Nam, who was filled with guilt, made me feel emotional. In the past, from the standpoint of the human race, I hated the monster race. However, after coming into contact with them, I understood that not all of the monster race were vicious and evil. People like Nam were much kinder than most of the human race. Of course, Nam's promise didn't have much of a chance of being fulfilled. The dog-headed man's innate talent wasn't high. Even if he entered that academy, it would be hard for him to cultivate to a high level. If his cultivation wasn't high, it would be impossible for him to get a high-level beast core from the academy. Of course, I wouldn't say that out loud. I just smiled and nodded, accepting his promise. Nam's mood finally calmed down a little. He returned to his courtyard to cultivate. The night passed uneventfully. When I woke up the next day, I watched Nam cultivate the entire morning. After lunch, we went to the village chief's house again. At this time, the village chief had already finished refining the 1,000 leaves wormwood spirit. The huge stalk of herb had turned into a bowl of thick green liquid. Even from far away, one could smell the medicinal aroma. Upon closer inspection, one could clearly feel the spiritual energy contained within the liquid. Under the village chief's urging, I drank the entire liquid in one gulp. As soon as the liquid entered my stomach, I felt a cool sensation surge out from my stomach and instantly cover my entire body. Immediately after, my muscles and bones started to tremble. After a short moment, my face turned red and I spat out a mouthful of black blood. Under the effect of the medicine, I felt much more refreshed after I had spat out the clotted blood in my body. The trembling of my muscles and bones also gradually stopped, leaving only a cool sensation throughout my body. I stood up and stretched my body. It was just as the village chief had said. There was no movement in my meridians, but the injuries on my body had completely healed. Back then, when I was struck by that world-destroying might, my injuries were extremely severe. Even after a few days of recovery, the effects were minimal. But now, with just a single stalk of herb, my injuries were completely healed. I have to say, this Thousand Leaves Wormwood's effects are miraculous. What made me even happier was that after the injuries on my body disappeared, the remaining spiritual power in my body started to stimulate my acupuncture points. A few of my acupuncture points started to heat up as if they were showing signs of recovery. It was a pity that the remaining spiritual power in my body was too weak, so the recovery process was extremely slow. I reckoned that it would take several years to recover one acupuncture point. It was almost impossible to use this method to completely recover. However, this feeling also proved that the Beast Core had the ability to recover meridians. As long as I absorbed the pure monster power in the Beast Core and used that power to recover the acupuncture points, I would be able to slowly open the heaven veins again. After confirming this, I was excited and joyfully opened my eyes. However, I didn't expect to see the village chief frowning when I opened my eyes. He solemnly asked me, "Duo-G, just now I felt a power in your body. However, your meridians were destroyed, so there shouldn't be any power left." The only thing I was surprised about was that I was too focused on checking my body and didn't pay attention to concealing myself. The village chief had actually discovered some clues. After thinking for a while, I replied, "My meridians were indeed destroyed, but there's still a few acupuncture points that are intact. The power that I used to cultivate has also been preserved." After hearing my explanation, the village chief was silent for a while before nodding his head. "It seems that your previous cultivation wasn't low. Just the remaining power is already at the intermediate stage of Monster Soldier." I nodded. When I was following Master, my cultivation was at the intermediate stage of Monster Soldier. Now that I'm heavily injured, I'm already very fortunate to have the cultivation of a Monster Soldier. The village chief didn't suspect anything and continued to say, "It's always good to have some cultivation left so that I'll have the power to protect myself in the future. All right, I still need to continue refining pills. You and little Nam should head back first." After leaving the village chief's house, Nam, who hadn't said a word, suddenly pulled me and said happily, "Duo-G, so you still have cultivation. It's a pity that you can't reach the monster spirit realm. Why don't we head to Sod Academy together? There are a lot of beast cores there. At that time, you'll definitely have the chance to obtain a beast core to recover your cultivation." Chapter 9:10. Greenwater Village was very safe, but if I wanted to obtain a high-grade beast pill to recover my cultivation, staying here wasn't a long-term solution. I had to head to the main world of the monster race to have more opportunities. Compared to other places, the Monster Race Academy should be the safest place. The only thing I had to worry about was whether there would be a powerful teacher in Sada Academy that would discover my identity. Thinking about that, I asked Nam Sada Academy. Just from the name, it sounds impressive. What kind of cultivation do the teachers there have? Naturally, Nam was very familiar with the academy that he had been longing for. When he heard this, he immediately replied excitedly, "The teachers there are very powerful. I heard that even the weakest is a demon king. Furthermore, the dean is an elder of the wolf clan and has the cultivation of a demon sage. Monster Saint, based on my previous understanding, I already knew the corresponding cultivation of monster soldiers and monster spirits. However, it was the first time I had heard of Monster King and Monster Saint. Thus, I pretended that I had followed my master and didn't care about worldly affairs. So, I asked Nam how these realms were arranged. Nam was already used to my questions and didn't suspect anything. He told me that above Monster Soldier was Monster Spirit, and above, that was Monster General. Although these three realms were powerful, they were still considered as ordinary cultivations. After Monster General, one could become Monster King. At the Monster King realm, one would become a true expert of the monster race and would be able to fly. After that, there were the three realms of Monster Saint, Monster God, and Monster Emperor. Those who had cultivated to these realms were all famous existences in the monster race. After listening to Nam's explanation, I had a rough idea of what was going on. The three realms below Monster King obviously corresponded to the three realms of Earth Master. Monster King was the Celestial Master. Above that, Monster Saint was the Yang God, and Monster God was the Chongju. As for Monster Emperor, it was referring to the realm, and obviously not the Monster Emperor. Above the Chongju was naturally the Sunset Ju. In that case, the highest cultivation in Sada Academy was the principle of the Yang God realm, so he shouldn't be able to see through my disguise. Since it was safe, I naturally didn't have any worries. I made up my mind to go to Sada Academy. As we discussed, we quickly returned to Nam's house. Grandmother had already prepared the food. When she saw us, she called us over to have a meal. For the past few days, I had been eating at Nam's house. The monster race's meals were very simple. They mainly consisted of various kinds of meat and occasionally some vegetables. However, no matter what kind of ingredients they used, there were only two ways to cook them. They could either boil them or roast them. To be honest, the taste wasn't that great. It's a pity that I don't know how to cook, so I can't do it myself. After the meal, Nam and I returned to the room. I recalled the various realms of the monster race that he had previously introduced to me. I then asked Nam how many experts like the Monster God and Monster Emperor were there in the monster race. The monster race respected strength, and these true experts were the idols of the monster race. Thus, after hearing my question, Nam started to talk nonstop. I don't know how many demon immortals there are, but there are only 5 demon emperors in the entire demon race. They are the 4 demon emperors and the demon emperor of the royal family. The 4 demonic emperors, demonic emperors. In that case, the demon race had a total of 5 ascended dawn realm cultivators. While I was thinking, Nam continued to tell me, the lion race that the monster emperor controls is the noblest race in the monster race. The Monster King City, which is located in the center of the monster domain, is under the direct control of the monster emperor. The other 4 demon emperors are in charge of the east, west, south, and north provinces respectively. As Nam spoke, the topic gradually shifted to the monster race's territory. I was already extremely curious about this matter and wanted to find a chance to ask Nam about it. I didn't expect that he would take the initiative to introduce it to me. Which monster emperor is in charge of our Rock City? I continued to ask. Nam shook his head. Rock City is just a small city in the North Province. The North Province is under the control of the Wolf race's monster emperor. The main city is Rapid City in the extreme north. Our Rock City can only be considered as one of the 10 subordinate cities of Rapid City. The Wolf race's monster emperor. Previously, when I met Gale and the others from the Wolf race, Nam had told me that the dog and wolf race were subordinate to the wolf race. It seemed like this was the reason. While I was thinking, Nam had already told me about the other 3 provinces and the monster emperor's powers. The main city of the West Province was Wind's Breath City, which belonged to the Great Rock race's monster emperor. The main city of the East Province was Blackwater City, which belonged to the Crazy Shark race's monster emperor. The main city of the South Province was Rockfire Castle, which belonged to the Lizard race's monster emperor. Just like the Wolf Clan's Rapid City, under each province's main city, there were dozens of subordinate cities of different sizes. Among them, the Western Province bordered the Northern Province, and the environment and climate were quite similar. Grasslands and deserts were the majority, and the people of the 2 provinces were also more frequent. As for the South Province, it was very far away, so it was hard to have a chance to interact. As for the East Province, most of it was covered by the ocean. The monster race, there was mainly the sea race. It was very different from the other three provinces as it was more independent and rarely interacted with the outside world. After listening to Nam's explanation, I had a rough understanding of the monster race's power distribution. I was rather shocked. The Wolf Tribe and Great Rock Tribe that Dunham mentioned were relatively within my imagination. However, the Lizard Tribe in the south and the Water Tribe in the east were completely out of my imagination. Adding on the fact that there were dozens of cities in each of the provinces, the Monster Tribe was already an extremely complete and developed country system. It wasn't much different from the human world. After slowly digesting the information, I asked about the Water Race and the Lizard Race in detail. Compared to my curiosity, Nam was extremely calm. After hearing my question, he didn't explain much and only said that after a few days, we would go to Rock City together and we would be able to see many other monster race. I would just have to see them myself then. At the end of his explanation, Nam introduced the monster race's King City in detail. I heard from Village Grandpa that the King City is the brightest pearl in the monster region. It's located at the peak of Ural Mountain. The lion race lives there and rules the entire monster region. When talking about the lion race that ruled over his territory, Nam's face didn't have any trace of dissatisfaction or hostility. Instead, it was filled with yearning and admiration. He continued to say, "The lion race is the noblest race and is our royal family. However, the numbers are too few, so there's a team of guard from other races in the King City. Ever since I was young, my dream was to enter the team of guards and head to the King City to guard the noblest monster king, Emperor Prior." When he said that name, Nam suddenly seemed to have been electrocuted. He knelt on the ground with a plop and stared in front of him. One of his hands was placed in the air, and his tongue was long. He said vaguely, "Respected Emperor Prior, your servant, Dog-Head Man Nam, pays his respects to you." Woola. Nam's actions were similar to a pet that was reared by humans. He expressed his loyalty towards his owner and also looked like a devout believer. I was flabbergasted by his actions. Before I could react, Nam turned around and signaled for me to copy his actions. I was angry and amused at the same time. I naturally couldn't imitate Nam's actions. I was the monster Emperor June. In terms of status, I was far above the lion race's Emperor Pu. He had to be able to accept my greetings. Seeing that I didn't move, Nam didn't get angry. After he respectfully saluted, he sat down next to me and said to me sternly, "Duo-G, I know that you were abducted by the great monster when you were young, so you definitely don't know the etiquette of the Dog-Head Man. It will be difficult for you to learn it all at once. However, you must remember that we aren't just the vassals of the wolf race, but also the servants of the lion race. In the future, if you hear someone mention Emperor Prior, you must salute him. If not, you will be punished by the Monster Emperor." Monster Emperor's punishment. I am a Monster Emperor. Am I supposed to punish myself? I laughed in my heart, but Nam's expression was stern, so I could only reluctantly agree. However, in the next second, Nam suddenly made a ruckus and asked me, "Did I say Emperor Prior's name again?" I didn't know what he wanted to do, but I did say it just now, so I nodded. Nam covered his mouth after I confirmed it. "You said again." After he said that, he knelt on the ground again as though he was electrocuted and repeated his previous actions. To prevent him from asking me to do the same action again, I stood up and stood behind him. Luckily, he was completely immersed in his prayer and didn't pay attention to me. Since Nam had mentioned Emperor Prior's name twice, the time he spent kneeling seemed to be much longer this time. When he stood up again, it had already been a few minutes. The moment Nam stood up, I took the opportunity to sit next to him. He didn't seem to salute often. After he stood up, he rubbed his knees and slightly sore arms. Even so, he didn't forget to remind me, "Duo-G, you must remember the etiquette. In the future, when you see Prior." Chapter 9:11. Nam's words were filled with conviction, loyalty, and humility. It even made him seem a little holy, but I felt sorrow from the bottom of my heart as I watched from the side. Compared to the human race, The hierarchy of the monster race was so strict that it was almost unimaginable. Since ancient times, the human race had the idea that generals and ministers have no class. However, for the monster race, their bloodline is already determined from the moment they are born. Their future achievements can be seen at a glance. That's why a small and weak race like the dog-headed men have already accepted their status after generations of accumulation. They have already regarded themselves as slaves to the noble monster race. Not to mention the thought of rebelling. If they lacked even the slightest bit of loyalty, they would feel that it was blasphemy. Nam wanted to continue brainwashing me, but after seeing that I didn't respond, he finally lost interest in preaching. He walked to the side and opened a simple wardrobe made of pear wood. He took out a black robe and a chain with an iron hoop from inside. I had never seen Nam wear this robe before. As for the iron hoop, I didn't know what it was. I also didn't know why he suddenly took out these two items. Before I could ask, Nam quickly put on the robe and tied the chain with the iron hoop around his body like a belt. The iron hoop, which was almost the size of his head, hung on his legs. It was heavy and looked very strange. While I was sizing it up, Nam had a joyful expression. He called out to me, "Duo G, do you think I look good in this?" I had to say that the dog-headed men's aesthetic standards were far from that of the human race. It was evident from the fact that Nam was the most handsome man in Greenwater Village. However, Nam's body was well built, and his figure could be considered tall and straight. Although the black robe was a little transparent, it didn't seem inappropriate on Nam. It was just that the iron hoop hanging on his legs seemed a little out of place. I looked at it without saying a word. Nam walked towards me with large strides. The iron hoop on his legs clanked against the iron chain. It was extremely loud in the night. Nam walked in front of me in a few steps and asked the same question again with a proud expression. His appearance was really comical. I couldn't help but grin. He seemed to have misunderstood my laughter, and his face became even more smug. He twirled around and continued, "I told you I, Nam, am tall and handsome. I will definitely win the hearts of many girls in this mariachi outfit." After spinning a few rounds, Nam seemed to be a bit dizzy. He collapsed and sat down. He looked at the black robe he was wearing and then looked at what I was wearing. He then said, "Duo G, you don't have a marijuana-colored robe, right? How about I ask Grandma to make one for you tomorrow?" This kind of clothing was slightly rough and transparent. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to wear it, so I quickly waved my hand to refuse. Nam suddenly thought of something and explained with a smile, "You don't know, but tomorrow is our Greenwater Village's quinquennial wife-choosing convention. All males above the age of 16 and females above the age of 12 must participate. At that time, all the men would have to wear mariachi clothing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to choose the woman they liked. This dress was left behind by my father. I was the only child in the family, so my grandmother let me wear my father's mariachi dress to attend the wife-choosing ceremony. However, I remember that we still have some fabric at home. I can ask Grandma to make one for you. You don't know, but the girls in our Greenwater Village are all as beautiful as flowers. I guarantee that you won't be able to find your way home." As he said that, Nam excitedly swallowed his saliva. I, on the other hand, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Half-beast men are naturally lascivious. Nam's expression was considered normal, but for me to wear this kind of black robe to attend this kind of ceremony, I really couldn't accept it. Seeing that I rejected it again, Nam's expression was a bit dejected. He seemed to know that he couldn't change my mind, so he didn't try to persuade me anymore. He only picked up the iron hoop at his crotch and played with it with his head down. When I first saw the iron chain and hoop, I felt that it was strange. Now that I saw Nam's actions, I couldn't help but ask. Seeing that I took the initiative to ask, Nam became happy again. He continuously waved the iron hoop in front of me and said with a smile, "This thing has many uses. You'll know when you see it tomorrow." It seemed that Nam didn't intend to tell me at this time, so I didn't ask any more questions. After chatting with him for a while, I climbed onto the bed and fell asleep. The night passed uneventfully. When I woke up the next morning, I realized that Nam was no longer in the room. I got up from the bed and was about to leave when the door was suddenly pushed open. The person who came in was wearing a black robe with an iron hoop hanging from his crotch. It was Nam, who was dressed the same as last night. He excitedly walked in. Seeing that I was already awake, he didn't say anything and just pulled me out of the courtyard. After exiting the courtyard, Nam's speed slowed down. Only then did I realize that other than the black robe he was wearing, he wasn't wearing any other clothes. His attire made me startled, and I couldn't help but frown. Nam seemed to notice my gaze and stopped in his tracks. He raised his head and stuck out his chest, showing off to me. "How is it? Am I tall and sturdy?" Nam's body was sturdy, so his figure was naturally indescribable. What made me speechless wasn't this. Last night, I noticed that the black robe was slightly translucent. I didn't think that Nam would come out wearing only this robe. You have to know that besides the head that symbolizes their race, the body structure of a half-beast was no different from humans. Wearing this black robe, I couldn't see anything from afar. However, when I got closer, I could see all of his organs. This damned custom of the kobold was really incomprehensible. I knew that it was useless to persuade him, so I could only avert my gaze and ask Nam what he was going to do so early in the morning. Nam was in a state of excitement, so he naturally couldn't see the discomfort on my body. He only grinned and told me that the wife selection ceremony was going to be held today. He had already made preparations and would immediately bring me there. Originally, I was curious about this wife selection ceremony, but after seeing Nam's attire, I could already imagine what kind of scene this so-called wife selection ceremony would be. I was about to reject Nam, but before I could open my mouth, there was a sudden drumming sound from the east side of the village. Hearing this sound, Nam's expression immediately became excited. He shouted to me, "It's going to start. Duo G, let's hurry over." After saying that, he didn't care about my struggling hand and pulled me towards the source of the sound. Along the way, there were many kobold men wearing the same attire. They were also hurrying forward like us. Everyone had a happy smile on their faces, just like Nam. Sprinting all the way, we quickly arrived at the village entrance with the other kobold men. Nam finally stopped. As he panted, he pointed at a pond in front of us and said to me, "This is the venue for the wife selection ceremony." I had only been in Greenwater Village for a few days. Moreover, I had been running between Nam's house and the village chief's house, so I naturally hadn't been here before. The pond in front of me was only a few meters wide. There weren't any weeds or water sources around it. It seemed that it was specially dug for today's ceremony. Behind the pond, there was a temporary high stage. On the high stage, there were two large drums. Two robust kobolds stood beside the drums. They held an unknown beast's leg bone in their hands and rhythmically beat the drums. With the support of the drums, it looked a little more solemn. As the drumming became more hurried, more and more kobold men in black robes gathered at the place. The originally spacious venue seemed to be crowded at this moment. After the last drumstick fell, the village chief, who was wearing a white robe and a tall hat, slowly walked onto the high stage. After he stood still, he pressed his hands down. The kobold men below the stage instantly stopped and raised their heads to look at the village chief, waiting for him to speak. The village chief wore a benevolent smile. After everyone quieted down, he didn't waste any time and directly announced the start of the wife selection ceremony. Following his announcement, the hurried drumming resounded again. The group of kobold men, including Nam, instantly started celebrating like crazy. Only I stood among them, and I seemed to be out of place. Chapter 9:12. After listening to Nam's previous words, I was already mentally prepared, but when I saw the naked hound-head women, I was still extremely shocked. Even though the monster race's social system couldn't be compared to the human race, they weren't an ignorant race. How could they have such a primitive and vulgar ceremony? After a long while, I regained my composure and shook my head with a wry smile. I could only treat this as a unique culture of the hound-head race. The heads of the hound-head women in front of me were covered with a layer of black cloth, leaving only two small holes for their eyes. Maybe it was because hound-head men were naturally active, but these young hound-head women's bodies were extremely well-proportioned. There wasn't a single trace of excess fat on their bodies. After covering their heads, even with my eyes, they still looked rather alluring. As the snow-white bodies got closer, the hound-head man on my side became more excited. He opened his mouth and panted heavily. Occasionally, he would let out a low growl, looking as though he couldn't wait any longer. Compared to the other hound-head men, Nam was relatively calm. At least he could care about me, who was beside him. He bumped my shoulder and wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth while teasing me. How is it? Isn't it like what I said, that the girls of our green water village are all as beautiful as fresh flowers? It's a pity that you aren't willing to wear a marui outfit. You're destined to not be able to bring a girl with you today. I shook my head and didn't say anything. This fellow probably felt that I was in low spirits as he chuckled and hooked his arm around my neck. He moved closer to my ear and muttered, "However, Duo-ji, you're my good brother. I definitely won't forget about such a good thing. How about this? When you find a girl that you like, you can tell me secretly. I'll help you lure her home. At night, I'll let you enjoy the tenderness of the girls of our green water village." After Nam said that, he picked up the metal hoop from under his body and shook it in front of my eyes while chuckling. At this moment, I didn't judge the hound-head men with the moral standards of the human race. I only shook my head and rejected Nam's good intentions. Unexpectedly, he misunderstood and patted my shoulder before patting his chest. He said proudly, "You don't have to be so shy. Us hound-head men-women exist to reproduce. It's their fortune to be favored by men." I was rendered speechless by Nam. Coincidentally, there was a group of kobolds pushing against each other. I took the opportunity to retreat from the crowd and stood at an inconspicuous spot below the stage. Nam was currently immersed in his beauty and didn't notice that I had left. After the lecture, the village elder walked toward me with a smile when he saw that I had left the village. He kindly smiled at me and asked, "Little Duo-ji, why aren't you wearing a mariachi outfit? Don't you want to find a girl to enjoy?" The village elder's attire today made him look like a scholar. However, his words were as lewd as Nam's. Even though I knew that this was their culture, my heart still instinctively resisted it. I shook my head and didn't say anything. The village elder seemed to have said it casually. After seeing that I didn't reply, he sighed and turned to look at the women that were slowly walking towards the pool. He said in a low voice, "It's a pity that I'm old and my body can't take it anymore. If I was 10 years younger, I would definitely lure a few of them away and give birth to a few strong young men for our green water village." The naked women in front of me should be younger than Nam. At the village elder's age, he could at least be their grandfather. I didn't know how many times I smiled bitterly, but I still didn't know what to say. The village elder lamented for a long time that he wasn't as strong as before asking me the previous question. Seeing that I couldn't avoid it, I could only awkwardly find an excuse. I said that my internal injuries hadn't fully healed and I couldn't withstand the torment. After hearing my reason, the village elder sighed again. "Looking at your appearance, you should be a bit older than little Nam. What a pitiful fellow. After being a servant for so many years, you definitely haven't tasted the taste of a woman. Since you've returned to the tribe, it means that you've obtained a new life. The wife selection assembly is only held once every 5 years. Injuries can slowly recover, but beautiful women won't wait for anyone. Originally, our tribe had a rule that no one can take a woman away without wearing a mariachi outfit. However, I'll make an exception today and let you have some fun." After saying that, he patted my shoulder and continued, "Good luck, handsome dog-headed man. With your appearance and physique, you'll definitely make the women go crazy for you." I was stunned once again. I couldn't think of a way to reject the village elder's kind intentions. I could only bite the bullet and agree before returning to where Nam and the rest were. Seeing me return, the village elder revealed a gratified smile and shouted towards my back, "Little Duo-ji, don't waste the strong physique that the monster emperor has bestowed upon you." After I returned, the dog-headed women finally walked to the side of the pool and stood still, surrounding the pool that was 10 meters wide. Seeing that, The dog-headed men at the side immediately shifted their gazes from the snow-white bodies and looked towards the village elder in the distance, as though waiting for him to give an order. I also looked over. At that moment, the village elder had found a handful of withered grass from somewhere. With a solemn expression, he knelt on the ground and chanted some strange syllables. His kneeling posture was similar to Nam's last night. It was likely that he was praying to Emperor Pu'er. Following the village elder's movement, the other dog-headed men also knelt in the same direction as the village elder. Luckily, I stood behind the crowd and looked left and right. In the end, I still sat on the ground. The dog-headed men that knelt on the ground first barked before collectively shouting, "Honorable Emperor Pu'er, we are your most loyal servants. Please grant us the right to reproduce." Following that, the withered grass in the village elder's hand burst into flames. It looked as though Emperor Pu'er had really heard the dog-headed men's shouts. The moment the flames appeared, the village elder shouted towards the sky, "Praise my master! Honorable Emperor Pu'er has bestowed upon us the holy fire." After everyone repeated it, they got up from the ground and watched as the village elder raised his torch and walked towards the pool. I didn't know what the withered grass in the village elder's hand was. It looked to be only 10 inches long, but by the time he reached the side of the pool, less than an inch had been burnt. The village elder stuck the torch into the fresh soil beside the pool and retreated a few steps. He lifted his head to look at the young dog-headed men and let out a short bark, as though he was giving some sort of order. Immediately after, the dog-headed women that had been standing on the shore jumped into the pool one after another, like dumplings in a pot. The huge impact caused the water in the pool to splash and fall on the torch at the side. However, it did not extinguish the fire. Instead, it caused the torch to emit a pale green smoke, which quickly enveloped everyone around the pool. I tried to take a few sniffs and found that the smoke had a faint fragrance that made me feel refreshed. However, after a few seconds, my head felt heavy. My blood seemed to circulate faster, concentrating on my lower body. After a moment, my body reacted. I suddenly widened my eyes as I looked at the dog-headed women playing in the pool. I felt that every inch of their skin was filled with temptation. Their heaving chests seemed to have an irresistible power that pushed me forward several steps. This situation was truly strange. I slightly frowned. After a short moment, I circulated the spiritual power in my body to clear my head. I turned my head to look at the torch that was still emitting green smoke. It was most likely that there was some kind of poison in the torch. After I got rid of the drug, I looked at the dog-headed men. They looked even worse than I had before. The dog-headed men were naturally tall and sturdy. Under the almost translucent Mari wine, they looked like beasts. All the dog-headed men, including Nam, were drooling at the corners of their mouths. As they swayed their bodies, they quickly untied the chains around their waists. Without the restraints of the chains, the Mari wine retreated to the back of their necks, almost exposing their entire bodies. At that moment, they walked to the side of the pool and shouted. One of their hands grabbed the end of the chains while the other hand held onto the hoop. They were aiming for the head of the women in the water. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.